You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
All right, let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us here on the show. My name is Chris Spangle. We're going to be talking about the 2024 election. It's mercifully only a few days away. So we don't have much of a roadmap, but we're going to talk about who's your daddy. So stay tuned.
Warning. This show is for adults, produced by semi-adults. So the language is sometimes strong and offensive. Welcome to We Are Libertarians, where our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. We examine current events from a libertarian perspective while treating modern politics with all of the irreverence it deserves.
There has been lie after lie.
We toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, a 15-year veteran of politics and media, Chris Spangle.
All right, we are back. It has been months since we've heard that intro. We are libertarians. About
Some
to
of us still haven't.
well, you there's headphones, but you don't need them.
Yeah, you don't need them.
So you don't need them. There's nobody calling in. There's no point. And I don't know. You've got this long hair, and
Yeah.
could be lice. I don't know. So
You don't want my foodies.
you got to talk louder. I got you up so loud.
You want me to be loud? I can be loud.
Thank you. About time.
I'm trying to do my NPR thing so you can get practice. I'm talking on NPR where everybody just talks like this all the time.
I'll pray. All right, that's Rhinehold. Harry, tell him to talk louder. You always talk loud.
Rhinehold, you could talk whatever voice you want. It's perfectly fine. Okay, don't let this man try to control you.
You've gone
okay?
soft.
All right.
Weak. Liberal. Also, here's Brian Wool. How the hell you say your last name?
Wholgemuth.
Wholgemuth. All right.
I don't know.
Any idea how to spell that, Harry?
W ethnic something.
Now, don't be racist. I want to say a special thank you to Joshua Sexton, who may be, other than Christy Avery, the only person to have ever listened to every minute of We Are Libertarians going back 13 years. I mean, it's 1,500 episodes, 2,000 episodes by this point. Who knows? We don't count anymore. But it's October 26th. Happy birthday to my ex-wife, by the way. So it's October 26th, and my birthday is September 9th. And
producer Paul.
Producer Paul? Okay, I should have mentioned him instead of the one that'll get me in trouble.
Yeah, happy birthday, producer Paul.
So, I mean, it's been so long. Like, we were married when this show started. It's how long it's been, and we've been divorced for over a decade at this point. But Joshua Sexton, every year, every birthday, sends me a birthday present. And so I have not opened this. He sent it in late August, so I've been holding it. But he said that Harry has to be here when I open it to possibly explain one of the gifts. And Harry and I, our schedules, like, it just doesn't ever match up. So that's why it's been so long. But
with the kids, and I'm doing competitive yoga.
Paul violated the terms of our agreement and showed up to my house and told me that you're doing all kinds of fun things. You were up to improv.
Yeah, I also did improv. Yeah, did improv.
Yeah.
Did improv classes.
So Josh writes, Saint, Lord, gold record recording artist, dear leader Spangle, hope you have a fantastic birthday and get honored as you deserve. I'm enjoying the return of the frequent podcast, even though it undercuts one of my jokes in this year's gift. Thank you for your entertainment and insight. Happy birthday. Now listen.
He must have wrote that before it kind of paused again.
It hasn't paused. You just haven't been on them. I mean, I
get the feed. I listen.
It's I know, and you're a generous $100 a month supporter, and we thank you for that.
And a great co-host on the other show on the network that does. We do every Monday.
Which is what?
Low Key on the Wall Network.
Yep, you can download that somewhere.
When it gets published?
Yeah, all 300. Yeah, when it gets published, when Spangle does do it, but the 300 plus of you guys who downloaded that every week, we thank you.
Yep. So let's open this gift. I've been
unicorns on it.
I've been very regular. I mean, at least 3 a month this year. Maybe more in some months.
Weekly, right? We're weekly.
No, I remember getting like 4 or 5 in a week, like once a day in the morning, everything, blah, blah, and then
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. I can't go into it. Oh wow, this is the best one yet. People Magazine's sexiest man alive. Learn how this BET breakout phenomenon went from dear leader to being America's daddy by shedding dozens of podcast releases a year. Josh Sexton says he looks like if Paul Giamatti and Andy Richter had a sexy baby. Reagan says he puts the snack in total snack. And Harry Price says he's my ideal husbando. Why is that funny? I don't get that one.
All right, so husbando. I can't believe he actually put that. Did he actually put husbando in there?
Yeah.
It has to be, because, like, why would you know that word? So you've heard that term,
I have not.
right?
No.
I figured you would. You know, someone that looks like you would use.
What does that
term.
mean?
You know,
White?
no.
Straight? Are you being bigoted?
Not really straight. I'm just saying, like, with that beard.
You son of a bitch.
Husbando is the opposite term for or waifu or your
Like wifey?
Well,
waifu.
waifu.
Oh, okay. So the opposite of a waifu is a husbando.
Husbando, yeah. Like, so you get your.
So this is a Japanese cartoon reference.
Anime. Japanese anime.
Are they or are they not Japanese cartoons?
No.
There's American anime.
And I have to pull this up.
No. Anime
The term originated.
Don't listen to Rhinehold. We boo him all the time on low key. You can come and pay to boo him. He's great. No. America can have cartoons.
Okay.
But it's the Japanese anime is a completely different animal, a different beast. You know,
American cartoons usually have more than 12 frames a second.
Okay.
In their
so it looks smoother than like anime, which is seems choppy to me.
choppy.
Yeah.
It looks choppy to you.
Choppy. Yeah.
What kind of crappy anime you watching?
I don't watch anime. I don't know.
Second?
Obviously,
14 frames per second.
Obviously, not watching like 60 frames per second or something higher, or watching someone like especially the new episodes of One Piece, watching like Monkey D. Garp just abuse the animation budget for like a couple
we say
episodes.
we're gonna take a break and go to the bathroom while he talk. Okay.
I know. Look, when you start talking about Trump, this is how we're all going to feel. So just sit through it and suffer, okay?
Yeah.
No, but the thing is about the anime thing, there is kind of a callback to graphic novel feel, like a graphic novel feel to it. So it's more panel to panel. So it's kind of like a panel with a slight movement to the next panel, to the slight movement to the next
Gotcha.
feel to it.
Yeah.
Nerds. All right, let's get into it. Let's ask, who is your daddy? And here to answer is Tucker Carlson.
Didn't have a job. She has no skills. How did we wind up with a system where Kamala Harris, you couldn't change the tire on your truck, much less drive it? How did she wind up at the top of the pyramid? And then once she's there, she lectures you like you did something. It's too much. You can't allow that. It's an offense against the truth, against reality, and against justice itself. And the second reason you can't allow it is very familiar to anyone who has children, which is if you allow it, you will encourage more of it. If you allow people to get away with things that are completely over the top and outrageous, if you allow your 2-year-old to smear the contents of his diapers on the wall of your living room, and you do nothing about it, if you allow your 14-year-old to light a joint at the breakfast table, if you allow your hormone-addled 15-year-old daughter to slam the door of her bedroom and give you the finger, you're going to get more of it. And those kids are going to wind up in rehab. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them. No. There has to be a point at which dad comes home. Yeah, that's right. Dad comes home. And he's pissed. Dad is pissed. He's not vengeful. He loves his children. Disobedient as they may be, he loves them. Because they're his children, they live in his house. But he's very disappointed in their behavior. And he's going to have to let them know. He's going to have to get to your room right now and think about what you did. And when Dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now. And no, it's not going to hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not. I'm not going to lie. This is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. And you earned this. You're getting a vigorous spanking because you've been a bad girl. And it has to be this way. It has to be this way because it's true. And you're only going to get better when you take responsibility for what you did. That's not said in the spirit of hate. It's not said in the spirit of vengeance or bigotry. Far from it. It's said in the spirit of justice, which is the purest and best thing there is. And without it, things fall apart. The Democratic Party machine, and notice I'm not beating up on Kamala Harris, who's just a hapless victim who happened to be there in the right color, so they grabbed her. Tim Walz, they needed some, whatever Tim Walz is. They needed a weak man, because it is the party of weak men and unhappy women. One of which leads to the other, by the way. Where you find weak men, you will inevitably find unhappy women. Sorry. And they make them on purpose. They weaken the men to drive the women insane, to have the most consistent voting bloc ever in the history of politics. Unhappy women, made unhappy by weak men. But it could be anybody. It could be anybody. Kamala Harris is just a stand-in. She's a cardboard cutout. She has a soul. God created her. I'm not attacking her humanity. But there's nothing there. It doesn't matter. If it wasn't Kamala Harris, it would be, I don't know, Pete Buttigieg or whatever. Who are these people? It doesn't matter. They're the cutouts. They work for the machine. They're totally dispensable. They're replaceable. And they need to have limits set for them.
All right, so I tried to find a clip that had as much context as possible, because a lot of the clips that you see of this are just the spanking daddy bad girl stuff.
Yeah.
Sounded like your house on a Friday night, Harry.
Yeah, pretty much. Also,
who's been the bad girl in that case?
we usually have to wrestle for that and figure that out. But no, yeah, it's that clip there. I think I didn't know, I haven't watched the whole piece of it, but I've seen that piece several times on several different YouTube shorts.
Yeah,
YouTube.
Yeah, it's being celebrated by the right, and it's being excoriated by the left. I wanted us to react to it because I felt that this was emblematic of how this election cycle has gone. When Tim Walz was picked, the conversation was, he's like your dad. Mm-hmm. He's just a great dad. He's a dad. Mm-hmm. I can see him being I wish he was my dad. Right? And Donald Trump obviously has always been Daddy Trump, Milo Yiannopoulos. That clip there is that Donald Trump is the dad of the nation who's going to come home. When he gets home, you're all going to get spanked. And it's not about bigotry or anything. It's just about justice. Right? So I think this leads to the notion that the country is looking at the presidency as a dad, as a paternalistic figure, not the top civil servant of the Constitution, which is completely devoid of a tribe. It's supposed to execute the laws for everybody. Mm-hmm. And instead, people are really looking at this election as if you are picking a tribe, you're picking a worldview to win this election. And if they don't, we're all going to get in trouble. We're all going to be in trouble. It's like very adult child of an alcoholic feeling, Brian.
Yeah. Yes.
I agree. I mean, well, first of all, Tucker's doing two things here. He's setting it up to that type of kind of if Trump gets elected, we're going to go ahead and be able to go ahead and fix and spank the people that are bad. But the second thing is that Tucker's at least setting up a possibility for him to open an OnlyFans account. And then he could at least then get some additional revenue that way. But realistically, it's just the same nonsense. It's just now at a higher level that we've seen before in previous elections with how terrible, Mitt Romney was, that he was a sexist. John McCain was an avid racist. W was Hitler Part 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Right.
And then, well...
Yeah, I think do you have anything else you want to add before I go to Rhinehold? Because we'll be there for like 25 minutes.
Yeah. I think that the notion that like the president, instead of being the top civil servant, is a dad or parental figure is very unhealthy for the nation going forward. And it's something that people need to like correct from it, like out of the culture. But you go to
Well, that's just the loss of civics.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have we're not seating the presidency in its right and proper place. We're looking at it as a spiritual office as opposed to a political office.
Right. Giving is like almost like one step to like a monarchy. Like it's like that next step, but it's also part of the dictator's handbook. So
we did see that a bit though in Obama in 2008 and 2012 when he was the light.
You're going to have to keep that mic
Sorry,
up.
Sorry, my mistake. But when we were seeing it in 2008 and 2012 with Obama being the light keeper and things like that, lots of reverent type of religious imagery around him.
Yeah.
And it's just keeps
the seas will stop rising.
All the guards. Let's give him the Nobel Peace Prize before he's even been in office.
The photos of the halo because the seal was around the back of his head.
The cult of personality of Obama really did kind of like honestly change or traumatize the nation almost in a way that like I think we're just now seeing like the ripple effects from it.
Yeah, so there's a great book called The Cult of the Presidency. I think it's Gene Healy, a Cato author. Check that book out. And feel free, if you're watching the live stream first, sorry you're looking at us. And second, you can leave a comment and we'll respond to it in real time. If you're listening to this later, then some of these are live streamed. You can go check out my YouTube channel. Just look up Chris Spangle. Rhinehold, when you hear, like, the other thing that jumps out to me in that clip is the idea of justice. Right? That was his core point. Like, we went from Kamala isn't qualified to be president straight into bad girls need a spanking back to she's really just without agency. She's just been picked because she's black. And oh, by the way, isn't everybody that disagrees with me gay? Right? Is that a fair summation, Harry?
Yeah, it's fair summation. At least that's what I heard.
He's very obsessed with strength and masculinity, and it's really weird. But
it's very bottom energy. Very sub-bottom energy that he's putting off.
Not even an aggressive one?
No. Like, and even the way he says, like, you're going to get spanked is very, like, weak, not very projection. It didn't seem like he could get away with spanking someone if they didn't allow it.
So, but the idea of justice being you disagree with me on your worldview, and I've taken, let's just like presume he didn't clarify, but let's say is he talking about underage minors that want to transition? Is he talking about a woman president? Like, what is he? He doesn't really say like what you're, if you're disciplining your daughter, how do you do it?
With words and reasoning.
Yeah. Right. So you don't just, not with vengeance, but daddy gets home and starts screaming and spanking her?
God, no. That is not going to raise a very productive member of society. That just teaches them to fear authority. That's about it.
That's a good fear authority. That feels like that's kind of what he wants.
Right, yeah, that's all he really wants. Like, no, I want to reason with even when my daughter gets in trouble, I try to get her to like, you're only going to be in trouble as long as you can't rationalize like why you're in trouble, why this is happening, why are you doing this. Let's talk about your emotion for this thing like that.
Yeah, but he's not even explaining, like what justice means. In this situation, disciplining your kid, you have to say, look, I've warned you. Okay, now there needs to be a timeout or a spanking spanking any past the ability to reason with them is stupid. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
But
just lowers intelligence.
The thing about our 5-year-old is that I've always been able to reason with her and say, look, this is why you're in trouble. This is the behavior I want you to stop. But I am her authority figure. right?
Yeah.
But is the president my authority figure, Rhinehold, to come in and spank me because I'm living a way that Donald Trump doesn't want me to? Because I live a different life than Donald Trump lives, right? Like, I'm faithful to my wife. I go to church. I actually read the Bible. I treat people with respect. I've never been sued. I don't rip off other people financially. So he and I are very different in terms of how we live our lives. But what do you feel about justice in this case? What's Tucker's version of justice?
Well, you got to understand that he's using a dog whistle.
Okay.
And it's part
right to racism with this guy.
It's not, I didn't say racism.
It's just dog whistle.
It's just a dog whistle.
Big dog whistle.
It's actually a dog whistle to fascism, but that's
Okay.
a whole thing that we'll get into later, I'm sure, at some point. But what you're seeing there is a part of a stereotypical fascist mindset. One of the characteristics of fascism is a big, heavy focus on machismo, or the male aspect of strong men, weak men, strong men.
Right.
You know? So that's one of the characteristics. But it also belies a certain misunderstanding and a difference that we've had over the years in what is the purpose of the president. What's the job of the president? How do you want the president to function? And here's where you have two sides. You have the side where the president is the chief executive who executes on the laws that the Congress, through the people, have authorized the government to run as. So he takes those edicts from the Congress, those laws, and he executes them. And that's all he's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. It used to be when a guy was running for president, or a girl was running for president, I guess I shouldn't say that, but when someone was running for president, they would say, I'm going to introduce to Congress a bill to do this because that's what I want to have. I think we should do. Mm-hmm. So therefore Congress should pass it to give me the authority to then execute it. We don't do that anymore. Now it's, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
Congress is my lapdog. You do what I tell you.
Yeah, it's gone from the idea of him just being an executive of the Congress with tons of guardrails and people around him who keep him on track and keep him from doing things outside the law or anything like that, to now we see it as a top person of the government who dictates his will to everyone, and everyone then will follow it. Yeah. And those are the two different versions of what a president is that I think we're seeing fighting against each other. And you see that the right, and then under Donald Trump, they want that presidency, the executive, that is the unitary executive theory is what it's called.
Okay. Explain that. What is that?
So the unitary executive theory is basically that
it was something really pushed by Dick Cheney first.
Yeah,
libertarians.
It used to be two Supreme Court justices believed in the unitary presidential theory. It is now the majority. It's something that Hamilton tried to push through. Hamilton wanted a monarchy. They wanted a strong central leader who dictated what should be done so he could react to things that were going on in the world and just say, this is what I want done, and everybody would go do it.
Right.
Instead of having to go, okay, now I have to get permission from the people to do this stuff. It's every 4 years as whether or not you were doing what we liked.
Right. The point of the Constitution was to make everything slow. Right. Like the Senate was the cooler. It came in and you had the wild passions of the House, and they represented the popular sovereignty, the popular view of the people, pass a lot of bills, control the money. Let's have the money flow from the House to the Senate where a lot of things would die. And the point of the Senate has always been that a lot of things are supposed to die there. You know, Kamala said this week in a town hall that she wants to get rid of the filibuster. It was in response to how she can get things passed in the House. She served in the Senate for 4 years and is the president of the Senate, but doesn't know that the filibuster is not part of the House. Neither here nor there. Like when you've got it's just two Looney Tunes going up against each other. But the point of the Senate was that it was supposed to be slow and deliberative. So all of this would create gridlock and keep the government small. The point of the Constitution is to empower civil society to come in and meet the people's needs. And the federal government is supposed to enable the states to mete out all of these laws and focus on just protecting the nation, printing money, so there's one common currency, and then enumerate 17 or 18 specific things that the federal government is supposed to do. But we are now at the point where there is an over-bloated bureaucracy across the government because Congress and the judicial and legislative branch have basically said to the executive branch, you figure out basically how to run a bunch of different things through the administrative state. And that's one of the consequential rulings of the Supreme Court this year is they basically said, no, Chevron deference is not okay, and you've got to have more enumeration in legislative. The Congress has to actually say what these executive branches are supposed to do. So you'll see a tightening of regulations, but we really have gotten to a point where people think about it like these are my judges, my Congress, my president, and F everybody else. It's not pluralism where the federal government and the state governments exist to be just to all parties. Right. And that's, I think, what motivates a lot of Trump supporters is that he's being unfairly targeted through all of these different lawsuits. And so it's not equal justice. And so therefore he needs to get in and rebalance everything. He needs to come in and spank some people. I'd say it took like 10,000 documents when you knew you weren't supposed to. That's a little bit different than Mike Pence taking 50. So and
the worst part isn't that they had him. And Trump wouldn't have been in trouble if he had just said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Here you go."
Yeah, right.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
He specifically obstructed justice in order to maintain them, keep them.
Yep.
And I think this, Harry, is my biggest problem with Trump. I definitely would default Republican. Like, in full disclosure, I'm not voting for anybody for president, and that includes Chase, the Libertarian. We can have that discussion later. John Ulrich, of all people, was trying to convince me. He voted for Chase today and said, you need to. You can't. Come on. So I could be persuaded, but I would not vote for Donald Trump, and I would not vote for Kamala Harris. I would never vote for a Democrat for president. I will strategically vote for Democrats at the local level because I live in a majority Republican state, and there needs to be some balance. But January 6th, the rule of law, the flouting of law is why a Trump presidency is really concerning.
Yes. Yeah. He should have been just like, honestly, everything should have just disqualified him to be running, to be up there. The Republicans are very shameful for putting him up there, but that is the candidate they chose to run with, and fine. That's their choice. They could just run this awful candidate and all this time, and everything that spews out of his mouth. It's disgusting. But I think a lot of it is also some of the, I always felt like this way. The media's done this for years, and it's not something new, is that anytime a judge or anything like does something like that, they always like, well, this is a Clinton appointed judge. This is a Bush appointed judge.
The media kind of encourages that tribal.
They think it's like, it doesn't matter. They are impartial people. Who cares if this person was appointed underneath this part? Yes, I can get it. There could be a bias in there, but that's not for like I get it. You're supposed to have the information out there, but like I think that kind of reinforces in the public. I could be wrong, but
no, you're not, because
what I felt from
when you are like, I've become, somebody that's trying to be better connected locally and understand what happens locally in a different way, and it's led me to meet a lot of people who are in these positions of power. They don't think like the person who spends all day on Twitter. Their brain works in a totally different way, and they react to things in a totally different way. People who are in power structures in local and federal places I think federal people more than state and local people for sure, but a judge thinks about their set of, plausibility structures, which is I have to go and consider case law when I consider this case. They don't consider what will the public think about this piece. It's all much different than things work much differently than like the guy who spends all day on Twitter, how they think. I think the mistake you can make is if you start to think that people in bureaucracy and institutions think the way that the public thinks. That's not always the case.
I think a lot of like especially like allowing more cameras into the courtroom and allowing people to actually watch these judges do that. I think judges also do a disservice of not allowing some. I understand in certain cases you really don't want that because of what's going on, but I think more cameras will allow people to actually see the process, see how the sausage is made. I think the one other thing that also broke me too when getting into especially local politics and stuff like that is that a lot of these, especially local agencies, you would think there would be all on the same team and working together, and you find out, no, they actively compete against each other. They don't really talk to each other. They don't make plans with each other. And it's the most mind-boggling, frustrating thing about, I don't know, politics or trying to do anything inside the
Fortville is competing with McCordsville for new warehouse space.
Warehouse space, a
tax space.
freaking library. Then you got like freaking Lawrence, who built a brand new public library, a bus station for the Purple Line, right? And they're trying to do a B&B, and none of it touches each other. I think it'd have been amazing to make the B&B, the Purple Line bus, being the library, being right there stacked on top of each other. But no, screw you. We're not doing that. Let's go buy different properties and have other things turn on. Sorry.
Brian, go ahead.
No, the one thing also you bring up about local politics and things like that is that there's a big thing going on up in northern Indiana with a lot of the solar farms coming through and things like that. And that's all being done under the table. People ask questions. And actually this morning, one of the realtors in town had to go and pay $500 to get the documentation to show what leases have been approved by the county for them to do that. And you're thinking that something like that would be important to discuss because there's a lot of people that are against solar in general.
Yeah.
But this gets back to is that there's just so much garbage going on and money inside of it and these petty little rivalries between towns, counties, things like that. It's supposed to be broken to a point like you were saying earlier.
These petty rivalries are built into the system to keep inaction in place. So you do it through private means as opposed to government. Yeah. But the problem is the government always takes on more and more responsibility, power, money, all of that. So now we're at a totally intractable place.
Right. And then you get the people now who are sitting there wondering what's going on here and trying to figure out is my land going to be affected or am I supposed to sell out like that? It's almost kind of like what happened with in the 50s with when they were trying to sell houses and try to break up blocks and stuff like that. In cities trying to and I can't think of the word of it offhand. When
not Unigov, was it?
No, when they were bringing in black families into
redlining.
Is it redlining? Okay,
redlining.
Yeah. But when they were doing that, it seems like they're doing something similar now, except with solar. But and I know it's a little bit off topic here, but it gets to the point of all this inaction is supposed to be there, but there are people that are surfing underneath it, and of course the endemic corruption that goes on all throughout every single facet of it. I had a friend of mine who used to be on not Kasich, but it was Kasich and Ohio governor before that. He was a reporter for them, and he told me one time that that's where the corruption began, and he said you were probably safe with a library board, but after that, some way or another, everybody's on the take.
Yeah,
somehow.
so let's go back to the unified executive theory. I don't think we really, we went off on a tangent a little bit, but
sorry about that.
What exactly, how is that going to play out if Trump is elected? I know this is part of Project 2025. There's a lot in there that is just standard Republican fare for the last 50 years, including this theory. I personally am not terrified at the very mention of it because I think that's overblown. But this, you and I go back and forth on this and argue about this because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the unified executive theory means that the president can come in, and he passed an executive order along these lines in 2020 before he left, but that everyone who works in the civil service, meaning you work for the FDA, the CDC, the EPA, the alphabet soup, can, if you wanted to fire somebody in one of those services now, there's a long process, and there's really a big question of whether or not the president has the power to fire an attorney general, a random employee at the CDC. Some people say, yes, you absolutely have that power. No, you don't. You have to go through these processes. It's protected by these things. Trump wants to essentially come in and say, everyone works for me. I can be Malay. I can walk in and say afuera and let everybody go. Did I get that right?
So every of these, all these offices and all these departments inside the executive branch were created by the Congress. Mm-hmm. So the Congress set them up, and they also have rules on who you can appoint and fire based off of political processes, and it can be political appointments, and how many of them are supposed to be just functionaries who work in the positions. And if you want to remove them, you have to go through a process of firing, and it can't be related to the politics and stuff like that. So you can have, we're talking thousands and thousands of people who work in all these different branches of stuff, departments that hold these jobs, and they're mostly people of knowledge. So you have somebody working in the Department of Transportation. They have a lot of knowledge and history of working with transportation issues and know how these things work and how the government works in that regard.
Michael Lewis, the Moneyball guy, wrote a book. I think it's called The Fifth Risk that I read that was really good, and it explained this, like the weather service. Trump basically fired the guy that was head of the weather service, National Weather Service, and put in a patronage guy. So you had a guy who was a lifelong trained meteorologist who understood how weather worked, probably didn't care one way or the other about government. I mean, at one point, the We Are Libertarians Facebook page, the number 1 and 2 most liked careers for the Libertarian page was soldiers and current federal employees, because most people that I've met in those roles know how messed up it is, because it's crazy. But instead, he fired this guy who was head of this weather service and appointed a guy who tangentially had some connection to some weather, but he was a big donor, and so he got this job for some reason. He wanted it. Yeah. And then they proceeded to kind of eat out the insides of that organization. When you and I argue about this, I kind of go, I have a hard time feeling sorry for all of these government employees. Right. This is kind of what we as libertarians want, right? We want federal agencies to be, I want the Department of Education to go away and let it be returned to local control.
There's a problem. There's a difference between wanting the department to go away and, if the department exists, having it run in a functional manner, a better functional manner, right? I would rather have the department working better as opposed to like, we're just going to make it terrible, right? And then, but that doesn't get rid of it. It still has the power. It still has the thing,
the monopolization
of into the educational system to actually make it worse than it is currently. I'd rather have it function better. Ideally, I'd rather have that changed over to a non-governmental agency that runs things without politics involved and all that stuff. But
Harry,
we're not there.
This is a classic libertarian argument between like the reform libertarian and the anarchist libertarian. Yeah. Okay, we need to reform it and government needs to run efficiently versus it's never going to run efficiently. That's a pipe dream. Just get rid of it altogether. Go ahead, Rhinehold.
I'm all for getting rid of it. That's what I'm saying is that but if it's not gone, we should make sure that it is running better.
Right.
We shouldn't take steps to try to destroy it. The collapsitarianism is what you're talking about, where if we make it so bad, people will finally jettison it, which isn't going to happen.
That worked with the Libertarian Party. They succeeded.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but it's still going.
It's still there.
That's the problem. It still has power. It's still doing things.
Yeah, Michael Heiss is still making $10,000 a month, and Angela's boyfriend's still its top employee.
But when we talk about what the goal is here is that those positions were supposed to be protected so that we could have a stable kind of functioning government. The president can come in and he can replace the heads of departments. He can replace certain people here and there. Those were considered political appointments. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, the underlying were going to be career workers who understood and knowledge of it, and they were going to take their lead from the people who were brought in.
Right.
Yep. So what happens now is he's written an executive order to say to reclassify all of these positions to be non-protected by that rule, by calling it a different type of rule. It's kind of like the same thing as saying, okay, everybody's now a contractor, therefore we don't have to follow the employment rules for you. We can do whatever we want, and then we can treat you as a political appointee, and we can kick you out. So that they're wanting to replace all those people. The goal is, and this is what Trump has learned when he tried to do things in his first term, he would try to do a lot of these things. People were saying, well, he didn't do all this stuff in his first term. He didn't because everybody pushed back.
Yeah. Say, John Kelly, who thinks he's a fascist, was his chief of staff.
When all these people,
him.
They would stop him from doing things and say, you can't do this, or we're not going to follow through in it. That one time he was going to replace somebody as the attorney general, and all the line prosecutors basically said, we'll quit if you do.
Right.
And it was going to be a thumb in the nose, and it was going to be a bad scene. So he politically backed off. So what he wants to do is now come in, and that was the point of Project 2025, above and beyond all of the policy things that they're going to do, which everybody wants to focus on. The real goal was, and the nefarious part was, they spent all this time, the last 4 years, building up a database of people that can be brought in so they can come in, take all these departments, fire everybody, fill them up with these people who are loyal to not the Constitution, loyal to Trump. So
Right.
if Trump says to the Department of Transportation, I want you to go out and do all these, or I guess Department of Transportation, and just say you want to put toll roads everywhere and we're going to do this and we're not going to care about the legality of it. We don't care about whether Congress says we can do it or not. We're just going to go do it. Nobody's going to tell him no. They're just going to go do it because he's the one who's told him to do it, right? And this can be spread across all the different departments, especially the Department of Justice, which is really concerning. He's also including inspectors general in that thing. So you wouldn't have any independent inspector generals who are put there by Congress to say the inspector general watches the departments to make sure that they're not doing all this corrupt stuff or doing some of these things outside the bounds of the legal ramifications that they have. So those are going to get replaced too with yes people.
Right.
So
Brian, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, we just talked about how when they hollowed out the, Department of, Interior Weather and things like that, that they did an inept job. What makes us think that if this did come to effect, that 2025 comes in, they have a database of people, that these people are going to walk in and be somehow even borderline effective? It's going to introduce chaos immediately. And what's going to happen? So let's say we take Department of Transportation says, I'm going to institute a toll road, and everyone's got to go out and get a damn roll of dimes to be able to go anywhere. And so you're going to destroy the economy.
But isn't
way.
that what libertarians want? Isn't all of this exactly what we've been fighting for the last 15 years?
But
toll roads, and who's going to build the roads, Harry?
No. Libertarians are people. Taxation is theft unless it's a user fee. We're perfectly fine of user fees and toll roads, but we are fine with paying for roads. But the idea that we're going to put toll roads over there, make people pay for these roads, and just destroy the economy. Nobody wants that because that's going to crash your Bitcoin. That's going to crash all your properties. All your net worth is going to go down. You're not going to sit on the hill and be ha 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 ha. All you're going to do is get big rig going through small town, tearing up roads. All the potholes are going to be awful. It's going to hollow out most of the rest of the Midwest and the Northeast because we can't fill the holes.
I guess here's my I am pushing back because I do genuinely not fear that, right? I just don't have the fear about it that you do. Where I do think it's going to be incredibly. I mean, when Trump wins, probably not if. We'll talk about that at the end.
It's if.
It's 50-50 at this point.
It is
right?
still jump ball. Yeah, it's still jump ball.
But if Trump wins, chaos ensues immediately because you're going to have. You can't do everything at once, right? So I think a lot of what happens in an election, everybody lays out the whole buffet and says you're gonna eat all of this buffet at once. If Kamala wins, you're gonna have World War III here, and she's going to introduce communism over here, and you're right. And then if Trump wins, there's gonna be the unified theory, and he's going to do this, he's gonna do that, right? You can really only do a couple things at the same time. And you're also not counting for the fact that Donald Trump is completely incompetent and declining in his mental faculties. Like Donald Trump, when he was in charge in his White House years, things fell apart. When Mitch McConnell and John Kelly were in charge, he got tax cuts. He got things done, right? Because they understand the bureaucracy, the system of how it works. So if you bring in a bunch of clowns, then it's going to become a clown car at some point. And so the reality is that when Donald Trump wins, the first thing he's going to do is start messing with the justice system to, get himself out of trouble. This is the thing he cares about the most. The second thing he cares about the most is immigration and rounding up illegals and denaturalizing citizens and people who have earned the right to become and so the chaos that will ensue that's actually going to take place is, can a president pardon himself? Can he fire this Justice Department employee? Can he do this? Because we have 250 years of rules, 225 years of rules that are going to count. You say, oh, well, and this is actually a persuasive point. And my argument has been, you can't just get rid of democracy in 4 years. That's foolish. Vladimir Putin has taken 20 years to undo 8 years of democracy building. This is a 225-year-old democracy, roughly. And Donald Trump is not going to destroy the nation because he just is a petty tyrant. What do you say?
Well, listen to what we were talking about before. The reason why a lot of things he wanted to do didn't get happen because the line people pushed back and said, this is illegal. You can't do it. This is against the court
Right.
system.
I'll
Say,
quit
no.
if you.
We'll quit
Trump,
if you do it.
Trump had a tendency to want to advance something really crazy, and then when he got pushback, pull back because he listens to the last person he talked to.
But when we talk about replacing all those line people, all the people who do the functions, who do the work with loyalists, when he says, go do this, he's not getting pushback.
Right.
They will go do this. And then you could say, well, the courts and Congress will stop him. How? Because if the line people are doing it and then the courts come in and say, you can't do that, they will say, well, we don't care. We're going to do it anyway. Then what do? Who stops them? Because the president can just pardon every single one of those people.
And we don't you have to have faith in Congress to actually use their powers to go after something like that.
But they don't have the powers.
Yeah.
Where's the
And,
only
the,
thing
and,
they
and
have
half
and
and
can
half
do
the
is
governors are half the governors are on his
money
side.
to do is pull cash.
But
That's
what
they
we keep
and they
saying
won't do that.
The balances of the legal system and the Congress will stop it. How? Because the executive is what really kind of does things. The law enforcement agency is in the executive. If the executive is controlling the law enforcement agency and Congress tells them to go arrest this person, they just go, no.
Most people stop.
And let me like introduce a hypothetical because I kind of don't care if he gets rid of the Department of Education. I'd like to see how this goes. They'll probably do it the exact wrong way, like the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It was great we left Afghanistan, did it the totally wrong way. What happens if Donald Trump says, I want you to use the military on protesters? That was my final straw with Trump. I was no longer giving him the benefit of the doubt after he said, I want to use the 82nd Airborne on protesters in Minnesota. You cannot use the American military inside the United States on citizens. The military is there to kill and destroy. It is not due process for American citizens, right? And he tried multiple times, and Mark Esper was his defense secretary and just ignored the orders and said, I'm not going to do it, which is its own constitutional crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Or you could say the mass deportations, what happens when a court says you can't do this and he just does these things anyways.
I don't think it's a constitutional crisis where he refused the order, because in the military, you're only required to follow lawful orders. Yep.
Right.
If you determine that it's an unlawful order, you don't have to follow it.
But you're saying, I replace Mike Pence, who reveres the Constitution. I can say that with legitimate understanding of Mike Pence.
What a good thing.
Versus J.D. Vance, who is just a
Weird
whatever
Author.
gets me power.
Weird.
Whatever gets me power. You're saying, look, the crisis of what happens when the military guys don't want to go, or they do want to go, or it's that chaos of and Congress has no power to stop. Because the thing about Donald Trump is, who has been able to stop him? The Republican Party hasn't been able to stop him. They've kowtowed to him totally. Mm-hmm. Even the people who are his most ardent detractors in 2016, like Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, these people, J.D. Vance, suck up to him. The Congress can't impeach him. That doesn't work. They're not going to remove him. Governors have no real power to stop him. Look at COVID and all that when Trump rolled out his plans, that gave the Republican governors cover. The Supreme Court can't really stop him, nor does it seem like they want to. And so we now have an executive branch that can do whatever they want. That's not good if you're a libertarian. It doesn't matter if I don't know how these guys have worked themselves into thinking he's a libertarian, but he can exercise lawless power because now the courts and arresting him haven't stopped him, and if he wins, then the voters aren't going to stop him. So why wouldn't he think he can go out and shoot somebody on 35th Avenue and get away with it?
That's the point,
right? He can.
Until we stop him, he can do whatever he wants. And let's take the Department of Education just again for a second. All you do if you get what he does is you're not getting rid of it. You're actually putting more politics into it. He wants to take over the Fed, right? So right now everybody complains about the Fed being controlled and the governments and everything, how bad libertarians think how bad the Fed is. Imagine if he gets a hold of it, where right now it's supposed to be a 50-50 split between the federal government and the state and the privately owned banks. They all have a say, they all have to vote, and it's kind of a 50-50. It's kind of an iffy 50-50. It's a little bit more 51-49, But okay. But he wants to make it so that he has control over what they do completely. So whatever he gets in his mind to do, he tells them to do. I want my numbers to be better.
Well,
therefore, I'm going to say you need to put the interest
one reason
rates
that
down.
a lot of black men are supporting him is because they got stimulus money. So we talked about this on the most recent Pat Down. And Pat's like, look, that stimulus money was for. I saw a reel about this, kind of along her lines. Like, that's 75 cents a day. You're going to vote for a guy that gave you 75 cents a day? So Donald Trump gets a hold of the Fed. He realizes he can print currency to buy your vote. What's to stop him from doing it?
He did it. He did it.
He did it.
Yeah.
He was actually mad at Nancy Pelosi for not having a bigger stimulus
Everybody
bill.
complains about the inflation we just went through and how now it's come back down again, but a lot of that was from him.
Right.
Well, the thing
Brian,
that stops him is $95 milk. That's what stops him. If you go printing money like that
Well,
again.
he got away with it. He's the one that caused the inflation. Then he just blamed Biden.
Right.
Yeah, he's going back in.
You start a couple of wars, it'll help bring the currency
Exactly.
down. Yeah, that's what's keeping the
No.
inflation at
He's
bay
the
right now
most
is Ukraine.
peaceful. Don't ignore Iran wanting to kill him and don't ask why. He's the most peaceful president ever.
Do you know how to get over that? Daddy comes in and institutes justice with some spanking.
So you get out of line and protest. Daddy needs to.
Yeah, you need to go into the camps where all the other people who are internal enemies
Not
to
camp.
this.
You're bringing up camps.
So how long is
So
he
you
before
already
Trump
exist.
goes
Hold on,
price
Brian.
counting? Sorry.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about rounding up all the migrants, not illegal immigrants, migrants, and people who are not faithful to the country, and people who are dissidents, and people who are enemies to the state.
Yep.
And deporting them, but before they deport them, they have to put them somewhere. They have to put them in camps.
But Donald Trump supports free speech. And the Republicans have been talking about cancel culture for a long time.
Yeah, like Elon Musk. Yeah, them and their free speech stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it is the free speech platform.
Just like DeSantis, who is now who tried to tell the media that they couldn't report on certain things. He was going to arrest them and have them thrown in jail because they were reporting they were playing this ad that he didn't like about abortion in the state, the new abortion thing that they're going against. So he basically sent a letter to the Department of Health and Human Services and told the leader of that department that department to send it on to the media and warn them against it. The guy says, I just got the thing and I was told to send it on as is. I sent it on as is. And then he got another one and he says, I can't do this anymore. And he quit. Right. But that came from an edict from the DeSantis' office to tell they can't run that ad.
Well, I'll let you give your bullshit reason why the Washington Post canceled their opinions. Why do you think that the Washington Post and these LA Times are not doing endorsements?
They're not doing endorsements for a couple of reasons. One, they want to try to appear non-biased because they're getting a hit on that and dinged on that constantly, and it's costing them money.
Which is why for 10 years this has been a declining practice of papers endorsing people, because I don't care what the newspaper. I already know you're all voting for Kamala. Stop.
But here's the other problem, is that Trump has promised to retribution when he gets in on the media companies that were against him. So people are starting to pull back on their coverage of that to say, hey, we were trying to be fair and balanced and try to avoid the backlash if he does win.
If you're Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, you look at a guy who could turn on you and flip on a dime and go, maybe Amazon needs broke up.
Well,
No.
And it actually was.
Well, go ahead.
Go
ahead, Brian.
Well, remember, Jeff isn't just Amazon. He's got his tentacles with Blue Origin and everything else that's going on. And that's a lot of government dollars there. So all of a sudden, if you tick off the next president, all of a sudden, all those government dollars, which, by the way, how much is the government buying in AWS these days in Azure? How
sure
many
a lot.
billions of dollars that they're buying?
billions,
All of a sudden, I don't like that Amazon stuff. I'm going to go and stick with Microsoft.
Right, so all of that money that we were talking about,
Yeah.
because the majority of federal dollars goes in massive quantities to state and local governments. It makes a lot of budgets. It's no longer state and state governments having control of the federal government. They depend on big block grants. There's a lot of charities now that rely on that too, and charities are actually how the government cares for the poor. So all these people who think that it's the food funding programs that like Gleaners, which goes to the food banks, that's all federal funds. So it matters a lot how the executive branch runs and who runs it, to give credence to Rhinehold's theory here. in that if there is a lot of chaos, there's a lot of dysfunction because we put in morons because they donated a lot to the campaign, or the guy who donated a lot said, yeah, my nephew really needs a job. Can you put him in charge of food distribution? Well, all of a sudden, there's millions of kids that aren't going to eat lunch because, my daughter goes to a poor school here in Indianapolis, and this is the meal that a lot of these kids get. And when COVID shut down, schools are the welfare distribution point. That's all federal funds, right? So there's a human cost, I think, to the chaos that's going to come. And that's why when I look at this race, Kamala Harris is clearly not, she doesn't have it. Whatever it is, she doesn't, I mean, we'll talk about her in a second. I don't think she poses any kind of fundamental choice for Americans. It's more of the same. She's not actually going to be really running things. She will, but she won't. Like Biden is running things, but he's not. Like there's a lot of, just I think in Donald Trump's case, he clearly wasn't running a lot of things because in his first term, in the first couple of years, he didn't have loyal people around him, which he said was his greatest mistake as president to Joe Rogan. She doesn't really offer a choice, but Donald Trump, I think, offers America something fundamentally different than we've had as a government. And it is much more about the rule of man than the rule of law. We exist under a rule of law system. It's why we moved away from, the reason Alfred created the Anglo-Saxon code and codified English law into written language is largely to stop the blood feuds. Because in 800s AD England, you had lawlessness because tribes, you kill my cousin, I have to kill one of yours. And it just the tribal fights that were going on made everything totally untenable. And so he started to use the force of the crown to institute the rule of law. And that eventually evolved to, with the Magna Carta, the king has to also follow the law. Mm-hmm. You can't just have your desires because you're king and you have this monopolization of violence. You can't just do whatever you want. The problem I have with Tucker's comment is that it is tribal. It is a return to, I don't like that you are living your life that way, and I disagree with your version of science or your version of morality, and so therefore I need to mete out justice to you, and I'm so much stronger than you, and so therefore I can do to you whatever I want. Yep. I think that's a frightening prospect in terms of the psychology of 30 to 50% of this country right now. And you are moving away with Donald Trump from the rule of law towards something that is regressive. It is not forward. Like we've talked about pluralism, but pluralism is basically the respect of different people, lifestyles, culture, equality under the law. I was talking to a Muslim friend last night. She's like, Vance and Trump scare me, even though like there's a lot of things I agree with. I also feel like I would be totally excluded from civil service, society, running for office. Like I would be a second-class citizen because I'm not a Christian. That's the opposite of pluralism, right? That is something that is regressive. Yep. And so, in terms of the choice that America faces, you really have something like the 1800 when Washington steps down and all of a sudden you have a choice. Do we continue on with the government that we had under Washington, which is kind of more centralized, a little more Hamiltonian, or do we go with Jefferson, who wants to give every 30 years a new constitution and the people vote on it, and much more populist and libertarian in some ways? Or do you want stability, right? That election was a core fundamental choice for Americans. Mm-hmm. Do you want to continue on the same path, or do you want to try something completely different? And I don't trust anyone with the force of government when we're going to detach from the rule of law, especially somebody that has shown that they have absolutely no morality. They have no ability to listen or desire to listen to anybody else. 800 I think is it 8,000 lawsuits filed against Donald Trump? Peter Baker,
counting, right?
let me just read this to you, okay? This is a crazy article that was in the New York Times. And I know the fellas hate when I sit here and read to them, but
I will say, like, the lack of tabs, I'm impressed.
thank you. Yeah, we're just having a conversation. Isn't that nice? Figured I'd try that for once. It's a new me. So this is Peter Baker's article in the New York Times this week. For Trump, a lifetime of scandals head towards a moment of judgment. Like, I just want you to listen to the first few paragraphs and how remarkable this is. Like, this is why I think Donald Trump has lived the most remarkable American life. I don't mean that in a positive or a negative way. I just think, name a human being that has had a crazier life than this guy. But in the context of giving him power, monopolized violence over the life of the nation, is this the guy that you want to wield that power? When the history of the 2024 election is written, one of the most iconic images illustrating it will surely be the mugshot taken of Donald J. Trump after one of his 4 indictments, staring into the camera with his signature glare. It is an image not of shame but of defiance, the image of a man who would be a convicted felon before Election Day and yet possibly president of the United States again afterward. Sometimes lost amid all the shouting of the high-octane campaign heading into its final couple of weeks is that simple, if mind-bending fact. America, for the first time in its history, may send a criminal to the Oval Office and entrust him with the nuclear codes. What would have once been automatically disqualifying barely seems to slow Mr. Trump down in his comeback march for a second term that he says will be devoted to retribution. In all the different ways, and they have a link there so you can go and see all the ways he said that it's about retribution. In all the different ways that Mr. Trump has upended the traditional rules of American politics, that one may be the most striking. He has survived more scandals than any major party presidential candidate, much less president, in the life of the republic. Not only survived, but thrived. He has turned them on their head, making allegations against him into an argument for him by casting himself as a serial victim rather than a serial violator. His persecution defense, the notion that he gets in so much trouble only because everyone is out to get him, resonates as rallies where he says, "They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I'm just standing in the way." But that, of course, belies a record of scandal stretching across his 78 years, starting long before politics. Whether in his personal life or public life, he has been so accused of so many acts of wrongdoing, investigated by so many prosecutors and agencies, sued by so many plaintiffs and claimants that it requires a scorecard just to remember them all. His businesses went bankrupt repeatedly, and multiple others failed. He was taken to court for stiffing his vendors, stiffing his bankers, and even stiffing his own family. He avoided the draft during the Vietnam War and avoided paying any income taxes for years. He was forced to shell out tens of millions of dollars to students who accused him of scamming them, found liable for wide-scale business fraud, and had his real estate firm convicted in the criminal court of tax crimes. He's boasted about grabbing women by their private parts, been reported to have cheated on all 3 of his wives, and had been accused of sexual misconduct by more than 24 women, including one whose account was validated by a jury that found him liable for sexual abuse after a civil trial. He's the only president in American history impeached twice for high crimes and misdemeanors, the only president ever indicted on criminal charges, and the only president to be convicted of a felony, 34 thus far. He used the authority of his office to punish his adversaries and tried to hold on to power on the basis of a brazen lie. Mr. Trump beat some of the investigations and lawsuits against him, and some proved unfounded, but the sheer volume is remarkable. Any of those scandals by itself would have been enough to derail another politician. Joe Biden Jr.'s first bid for presidency collapsed when he lifted some words from a politician's speech. W came close after the last-minute revelation of a drunk driving arrest. Hillary fell short in the least because of FBI investigation emails. Not Mr. Trump. He's moved from one furor to the next without any of them sinking into the body politic enough to end his career. The unrelenting pace of scandals may in its own way help him by keeping any single one of them from dominating the national conversation and eroding his standing with his base of supporters. And then he goes on to kind of dive a little deeper into some of that. But it's the sheer volume that I think I just don't get how people don't look at this guy. I'm not saying that because you get arrested and get a felony, you're a bad person. And maybe there is something to him being persecuted. But, like, your whole life has been lawsuits. Your whole life has been in court. It's just striking. And I don't understand how we are 10 years into talking about this guy and he may be the next president. I don't know what that says about America. I really think a lot of people, it's that they look at, they just believe that the conditions aren't good. Economically, things are not good. I personally am doing better than I've ever done in some. Well, I'm not. I did better 2 years ago than I am this year. But what do you think it says about America, Harry, that Donald Trump, despite the constant drumbeat of wrongdoing, of groping allegations, of like being just like if your daughter acted this way, you'd be have her on Montel with the drill sergeant yelling at her.
Correct, and hoping she doesn't follow.
But for some reason, we've all just let this guy have a pass. I don't understand why he gets a pass when no one else does.
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't think anyone in this room has given this man a pass.
I think by now Brian Nichols is halfway through this episode, going, "What the hell?"
Well, because it was easier to give him a pass in the beginning because people were just saying like some outright lies about the guy or speculation, but then it was just like, oh no. As we get deeping and more into things, people actually speak it up and not like anonymous source close to the
frog's on fire. It's been boiled like crazy.
Right, exactly. The other thing with it is from a lot of different people that I've also talked to, because I live in a very Trumpian town, so people are very free with their wanting to talk about it. A lot of them feel kind of almost kinship with him because of the prosecution, stuff like that, because of some of the laws that we have locally and federally, that they actually feel like, well, I get that all the time because I try to do this on my farm or my own property, and the town won't let me do X, and then all this different stuff that's happening to them. They almost feel the kind of kinship, like, yes, the laws, everything is stacked against us, and
so that corruption of the state, federal, and local level that we were talking about earlier actually helps him.
Correct. Yeah.
People feel it.
Yeah, there's like a huge hubbub in my little town just because someone built a farm on their property because they didn't get a permit for it. I know, it's just a little farm. Just not touching anything, not messing anything.
I got my permit right here, and it's a declaration. Suck that, state man.
Yeah, so they kind of feel that type of thing. But I don't understand that. I don't get it. Maybe because at my current age, I haven't spent in and out outside of a courtroom, so I don't understand that, nor do I need that type of representation of myself into a candidate. So
for me, I look at it in the Christian world and I don't get it at all. As someone who tries to live their life as faithfully as listen to this show 10 years ago versus now, I've tried to make some progress on a lot of different things, right? Like that's the goal, is sanctification. You are always trying to progress, and yet we have people running for office that think that Donald Trump is the rod given by God to fight and that's why I would never vote for Kamala, because I do think, I'm not a secular humanist. I think Jesus is king. I think it's crazy that she would say you're at the wrong rally. Like that's a very telling moment to people who think like I do. I'm very pro-life. But that doesn't mean that I want somebody with this moral character to be in charge either. Like I had an argument with someone the other day, like, well, why would you're not voting for Kamala, are you? I was like, absolutely not. I haven't changed. Just because I don't like the Republican, it doesn't mean I like the Democrat. And they were like, well, what choice do I have? I was like, you cannot vote. Or you could vote for any one of the third parties, or you could write somebody in.
Exactly.
It's just this locked-in thinking that you have to participate and you can only choose these two things that is the cult. Yes, Trump has a cult of personality. Mm-hmm. There's an anti-Trump cult of personality, and then there's also the cult of, like, some people make hating Trump their whole personality.
Yeah.
Anybody want to point at him?
But the other thing is, like, with voting against Trump for self-defense, there are a whole group of individuals out there that have to vote against Trump because of the different laws that he wants to bring in,
right?
Or the people that he wants to bring in. So if you are on the pro-choice camp, you have to vote. Okay, I don't want to say like you have to, but like a lot of them feel this way, that they have to get Trump out of there. Or if you're just in the LGBT community, you have to make sure Trump doesn't get into power because this person is actively going after taking rights away.
If you are an American citizen who is granted citizenship by this country, and you are online saying things about Trump that you don't like, and somebody notices, and then somebody made some mistake in your paperwork along the way.
Yeah.
You could be going back to a country you never have you have no concept
you
of.
can't speak the language, never been there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's already
we're
happened,
doing
by
that.
the way. That's happened under Biden.
It's happened for the last 30 years. We've been doing that to people.
Right.
Shipping them out. And
which is awful.
But not at the level he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's also wanting to get rid of birthright citizenship.
Do you think that all those people, it's not about the man, it's about the people at the rallies holding the signs that say mass deportation. Do you think they're not going to get involved to rid their community of legal Haitians?
they're already trying to in Logansport.
Here in Indiana. Yeah, Logansport, Indiana. Look it up. Yeah. And the state guy who's going to be the next lieutenant governor's all on board.
Ugh.
So Ryan, go ahead, everybody. Like, weigh in here. I mean, that's my view of this election is I'm not voting because it's more of the same with Kamala.
Mm-hmm. Get that?
Incompetence, bloated bureaucracy, more war. It's just a continuation of where we're at as a country that I'm deeply unhappy with that led me to become a libertarian 15 years ago versus somebody that offers something unknown, and maybe there are facets of what he's talking about that I like being more non-interventionist. He's not an anti-war candidate by any means.
Correct.
Again, why does Iran want to kill him? I think, as a Christian, conservative, straight white male, like you look at a lot of what Donald Trump wants to do, and I'm like, yeah, I like that, right? It's not going to affect me, but, it's an unknown choice that I'm not willing to take.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to centralize power, and he doesn't have the character to do that either.
And the whole lie that, like, if Trump was in power, Putin wouldn't invade Ukraine. That's bull crap. That was just the right timing for, and Putin took a gamble. The rest of the EU and the rest of the countries would have blinked and gave money. Everyone was sitting there in the bed in such debt because of COVID. And the only person that probably, like, on paper could have gave money was the U.S. and they took that freaking gamble. And it was a great gamble to get because a lot of those European countries was getting ready to say, nah, we good.
No, it has to do. Yeah, I mean, what people need to realize is that in the 2030s, we did a show on this last year. In the 2030s, Social Security will no longer there's going to be automatic cuts.
Yes,
30%.
Like a 30% cut to every single person's paycheck unless Congress acts. But the problem is in 2030, they will not have the money to do that. They will have to massively raise taxes, which they're not going to do.
Yep.
And so they're going to inflate the currency. You're going to have funding issues in the 2030s with Medicare and Medicaid. And so what Russia, China, and Iran are doing to us is spending the 2020s, forcing us to spend money that we don't have the way that the Americans did against Russia in the 80s in order to collapse our system of government so they can rise in power. They can no longer be subject to our sanctions, that they can build their own world order as opposed to participating in the one that we're under. So it doesn't matter if Donald Trump or Kamala Harris win this election. We have three very capable adversaries, and I'll throw North Korea in there, that don't want to live under the order of the United States and NATO's government because they get sanctioned. And so you're going to end up having Taiwan invaded, for instance. You're going to have the war in Israel and in Ukraine continue because this is how they bleed us. And we have to have leadership. And if you want to create more of a dictatorship at the presidency, knowing that you're going to have these crises, domestic and foreign, in about 10 years, that's crazy to me.
Right.
That doesn't work out well.
I do want to comment about Russia and China here because there's a couple things on that maybe we aren't looking at here. Russia this week just raised their capital interest rate to 21% across the board. So all loans, everything else inside Russia business now is borrowing at 21%. No business is going to borrow at 21%.
Right.
Things are going to fall apart. China has such a bubble going on with their real estate that they're trying to slowly pop. but they're not doing a very good job of it. So what's ending up happening is China's running into problems with not only from their financial perspective, but also from a population perspective, because they've realized they've hit their peak, just like Russia hit their peak of wartime capable males to being able to go out and fight and then keep the economy going. China's already hit their peak and they're on the downhill. So when you look at...
Which means they're going to become more militaristic.
But the problem is that when we look at Taiwan, Taiwan's value is it's at this point it's like a badge of honor for China, because Taiwan's value is from its semiconductor production. And just this week, I think TSMC announced that the Arizona plant surpassed the TSMC Taiwan plant in microchip production. So when you think about that, you're going, now wait a minute, that value just moved out. Now all of a sudden, if I bomb that, they're still getting chips, and I'm going through all the sanctions that Russia just did. You also have the pressure of a middle class in China that's growing. The smart ones have already left. That's why Bitcoin and everything else became illegal in China, because that's how they were getting funds out of China, was through Bitcoin. But those smart people are out of there. There's still people there that are very smart, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of problems going inside of China as well that are going to preclude going to being able to start a full-fledged war on an island that's not just going to Cuba. This isn't just going up on a nice beach. You've got one half that's heavily defended, and the other half is sheer cliffs.
Yes.
So either you're going to have parachute people in, which Taiwan's already built for that, and deal with all the missile defense that's around there from the Philippines and everyone else, Japan, Okinawa. That is going to make it very, very difficult to be able for China to be able to do that. And the last piece is North Korea. I mean, they're selling soldiers to Russia to keep the lights on.
Just 3,000. Just 3,000.
Just
and
3,000,
Russia's buying them because they don't have the manpower. They've
Yeah.
killed off 25% of the working male force. They can't keep that up.
Both Russia and Ukraine.
What
Both Russia
isn't
and
the number of
Ukraine-
Russian dead in the hundreds of thousands?
Yeah, it's over 500,000. But that's how
Holy
Russia.
cow.
That's how Russia
Is that
does wins
dead or
wars.
just casualties?
They're dying like 10-1 almost against the Ukrainians.
That's wild.
But the Ukrainians are still getting a pretty rough time too. I mean, it's not like
Both
but
populations
they
are
will
done.
fight till the end. The Ukraine mindset is they're fighting for their country. They'll fight to the end. They're not
Right.
going to.
As
They're not
opposed to
gonna
the
go into talks.
mindset of the Russian soldier, which is, I just
Why
want to
am I
go
here?
home.
Yeah.
Right. Or
Why some
be
North
shot in
Korean
the head,
troops
in the
has
back,
defected
shot in the
also
back.
when they get there. That's why you don't get mercenaries to fight your wars, because once you can defect, you defect.
Well, there's already a bunch of talk too about some chatter on the radio that's been picked up with the Russians are saying, "What do we do with these idiots? Because they're not this and that." And there's a whole bunch of infighting going on now
Right.
because they're there.
So we've got to let Rhinehold. Go ahead, Terry.
I was going to say back to China, all right. But China's also, even though they have the BRICS nation, right, where you're trying to build that thing, China is still being an asshole to India for some freaking reason.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that because
India is going to be what China should have been, because they're a hybrid of social control but also free market.
Right.
It's sort of where what they learned from China in the 2000s is, okay, you can have some of these social controls and nationalism, but also if you liberalize your economy and you try to balance it, you can grow really fast. And so that's what's happening.
And India probably does have 8 billion people and rising. China does not. China is overcounting. India is probably undercounting their people.
Yeah.
And it's because I think even this last week they finally just trying to have talks right now in Russia right now because of China's moving in on the Himalayan, on the large point where they're trying to get people to get off their freaking border. So the whole Pacific NATO, because also the China's also messing with the Philippines. They have been going with the Shoal Islands, so that is still going on. So you have a lot. They've pissed off everyone else besides China, cheated, and I think Abe was always before he rested in peace was just said hey, if China started invading Taiwan, this is our chance. Our ships are going to Beijing.
Yeah.
But they're already doing this thing where they're already starting to push back on a lot of the disputed Russian border stuff.
Correct.
They got they know they can, and they're also they don't like North Korea being around, so they're not happy with what Russia's doing. So they're going to be fighting with Russia here real soon. So that
Correct.
whole thing's going to fall apart.
Yeah, China's also taking territory from Russia too. At the exact same time, they're fighting back from each other, which is ridiculous.
Well, it's a good thing we're going to have a competent leader of the United States here
You had to deal with all
a week.
Yeah.
So
That's not even Inner Mongolia.
who's
and
thoughtful?
considerate about things. It takes on all different information and makes
Romney
good
Newsom
decisions.
2024. Can you imagine? That's would be the most boring podcast ever.
I'm ready for it.
I know. I would have been good. You know what? That's why I keep telling people. It's like, man, I really hope someone's looking for Fetterman in 2024. 28. Go for some Fetterman.
I've got to let Rhinehold talk about
Oh, yeah,
fascism.
you're
Yes, that's right.
We got to let him talk about fascism. You said fascism earlier. To me, this is one of those words that go ahead and crack it open. All right, if the three of us need to go to the restroom, now's a good time.
Alcoholic beverage of choice. It's a drinking game.
It's sort of one of those things that is thrown around a lot, but hard to define. Yep. So, what do you consider fascism to be in the American context in 2024?
So the huge problem.
Into the
you
mic,
have-
please.
Yeah, the huge problem you have with the term fascism is that it has been used and misconstrued, and the definitions are all over the place on what it is. So even like Jonah Goldberg has a book about liberal fascism and stuff like that, and takes a lot of things in history and tries to paint a picture, which he even admits that some of it he kind of got wrong. And then you've got other people who say basically anything that's not what we think is the right way to run country, that's fascism, or this is fascism, that's fascism. Me personally, and I would never have called, and I never have called somebody like George Bush a fascist. Never have, because he wasn't, and neither was Reagan, and neither was these people weren't fascists. They were called fascist by a bunch of people who just didn't know how to explain what they didn't like about them.
Right.
So they just found a term and they used it. The problem with that is that when you actually get to someone who is fascist, no one wants to hear it.
Yeah, because the last 10 Republican presidents have all been called fascists, literally.
Right. Yeah. And you can't go and look and see Trump and say, oh, he's just like all these other Republicans. I don't think anybody would say that. Right. In fact, if Reagan or Bush were in the Republican Party now, they would be kicked out for being worse than Romney. They're just leftists, right? And neocons or whatever you want to call them, because they aren't what this has turned into. And so there's some good writing out there. There's a guy named Umberto Eco who grew up in Italy fascism and has written a lot of books about fascism and kind of defined, as what I use. Some people don't, but I use his 14 characteristics of what a fascist is.
Get ready for all 14, boys. Settle in.
I've got them pulled up. But the thing is that you'll see some of the characteristics on this list, and you can go look it up. It's a very short essay. It's not like a big book or anything. It's fascism, fascism. You can find it at a bunch of different places. Have posted it. But he does go over the 14 characteristics. He talks a little bit about what fascism is and his history with it, etc. And it's not a long read.
All right, ChatGPT. What is Umberto Eco 14 points of fascism? Cool. I love ChatGPT.
There you go.
Cults of tradition. Fascist ideologies often root themselves in ancient myths and traditions, needing a return to them.
And the thing that's important about that is it's a mythical cult of traditionalism. It's a mythical golden age. It's usually a couple different points in history kind of merged together. A good example is that he mentions in the book, the essay, that
the Templar Knights of the Crusades merging with
in
Jerry
Italy,
Falwell.
there was a specific where they took the Holy Grail and merged it with the Protocols of Zion.
Right,
and made them like that. So it's that type of thing, and we see this a lot in the modern fascist movements with a big focus on Rome.
So he wrote this in 1995, by the way. So rejection of modernism.
Mm-hmm.
Fascism is suspicious of modern ideas, emphasizing irrationalism over the advancements in science and social progress that characterize modernity.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, cult of action for action's sake. Fascism promotes action without reflection, where thinking is seen as weak and indecisive, favoring the immediate violent imposition of will. Disagreement is treason. Any form of disagreement or criticism of the regime is seen as a betrayal, and intellectual discourse is considered a threat to authority. Fear of difference. Fascism often relies on the scapegoating of minority groups or others and considers any diversity or multiculturalism as a danger to society. Appeal to a frustrated middle class. Fascism often arises in societies where the middle class feels squeezed or in decline, harnessing their economic anxieties or frustrations. 7. Obsession with a plot. Fascist movements frequently use conspiracies to unite people against a common enemy, blaming secret forces for societal woes. The deep state. The enemy is both strong and weak. Fascism portrays enemies as both omnipotent and pathetic, a duality used to stoke fear and hate without consistency. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. In fascism, advocating for peace is equivalent to sympathizing with the enemy, where all opposition must be crushed. Contempt for the weak. Fascism glorifies strength, often holding up those perceived as weak without contempt or disregard.
Alpha, beta.
The disabled, pacifists, the elderly. Selective populism. Fascist leaders present themselves as the direct voice of the people while simultaneously rejecting true democratic processes. Heroism and machismo. Fascism glorifies a hyper-masculine, heroic persona celebrating strength, dominance, and aggressive pursuit of goals. The cult of death. Fascism tends to glorify martyrdom, encouraging followers to embrace the idea of dying for the cause with a romanticized view of violence. We haven't hit that one yet.
Haven't?
Well, I would like
January 6th, we got a lot of militant groups out there. I mean,
yeah, but
the rise of them,
but
the
the
rise
thing
of them
is,
to power.
there's a difference. Like, leftist violence is much more prevalent in like 2020, for instance. They're out in the streets. It's violent. It's spontaneous. Or right-wing violence is much more plotted out and much more controlled, because you had January 6th. Look, the guy with the zip ties on January 6th was there with zip ties for a reason. Right. He didn't get the chance to use them because of the efforts of the Capitol Police. Right. But does anyone listening to this not think that guy with the zip ties would have used them on a congressman had he had the ability? Oh, yeah. Like, I know that you go listen to our episode from that where we had two people who were there. Like, yes, the majority of people were there for a rally, like one of Glenn Beck's Tea Party rallies. Yeah. Yes, there were like people like the shaman who were in the Capitol peaceful, probably got a raw deal. Correct. And then there are the people with the zip ties who were there to commit violence.
When you wear a shirt that says Civil War, January 6th, on January on that date to the rally. Mm-hmm.
And okay, let's just take the premise of the guy that is the government plant in the crowd with the bullhorn saying rush in. Yep. But that guy has no power if people are not there ready to do what he's there with the bullhorn for, right? Like, there's no self-control, right? Like, so but I think if you're going to talk about right-wing violence and militants in this country, there's a lot of disaffection and disdain, and these people don't do anything but go to work every day. They may have their guns, but they're not out.
But you've got people shooting up Democratic
crazy
offices
people,
in
crazy
Arizona.
people.
Yes, they're crazy.
People are shooting at Donald Trump, and those people are crazy.
Yes, but you got people who are like I said, the Democratic stuff over there. You had people trying to go after FEMA in there because of the plots that they were hearing. It's how the movement gets people to ignore all of the things
psychosis.
That they're seeing
it creates a psychosis
into a cult kind of psychosis thing. Yeah. It's part of the whole list.
But you can look at the guys that are taking shots at Donald Trump and go that the constant Hitler talk has done that to these people.
Yeah,
too,
but those people were pro-Trump people before. They were against Trump because of things that Trump did that they wanted him to do that were more down that fascist path that they didn't do.
I don't buy that.
Let's take.
We don't know about the first guy because obviously there's no record of anything with this guy, so that's weird. The second guy was like all over the place. One minute he's a Ron Paul guy, and next minute he's a Bernie guy, next minute he just
people crazy.
He was a Trump guy, then he jumped to all the people who are trying to fight. Like, you need to take over because Trump's not doing it.
Recruiting
you need to be,
people in Ukraine.
So so he got people like Tulsi Gabbard and those people. He was trying to get them to run because he saw them as the next movement of that nationalist populism that is indicative of what he was going into. And it's part of the problem too, is because you have populist movements on the left; those aren't fascist. They use some of the similar tactics, but they're not. They don't follow into the right thing. They're more like it's a different term. They're both totalitarian. They're both populist. They're both nationalist. But fascism uses a specific set of thought processes and maneuverings. The machismo thing, the weaker thing, the duopoly thing.
It's more about messaging than it is about the actual goal. Because like National Socialism is basically just socialism and communism. Like there's not. It's a centralizing of power to inflict pain on the society of people that they don't like. But fascism used certain tactics. The last being newspeak. Fascist ideologies simplify language to limit complex thought, often using slogans, sound bites, and reducing vocabulary to prevent critical analysis.
It was always a kind of anti-intellectually newspeak. It's not like the newspeak of we have these new terms that people will use. It's more
Kamala saying she's for freedom,
but it's more like
peace is war.
There's two genders, and that's just street biology, and you can't think about. Well, here's some complexities of this and that stuff. That's considered out of bounds. You have to have this, black and white. Things are this way, things are that way, and dumb things down to a way that people don't no longer question. They no longer question the topic at hand because they're told this is the way it is.
Yeah.
Brian,
we go the exact opposite direction though on some of this, where we sit there and tell. You have teachers who are going out and saying that I don't use gender-based pronouns. I use they, them for all children at whatever age it is. Mm-hmm. They're making a choice to do that. And so, I mean, this kind of goes almost both directions. You can say, yeah, I agree. There's a spectrum on gender. There's a spectrum around sexuality. There's a spectrum on a lot of things. But we're talking about where, one side is saying everything's a spectrum and you need to respect everybody's pronouns and things like that. And the other side is saying, no, I don't have to respect your pronouns. And the rest of us are staying in the middle going, just don't be a jerk to each other.
I don't care about your pronouns.
But it's always been that way. It's always been the people.
Let me stick up for Rhinehold. But like this argument about pronouns feels like part of what he was described in this document. Right. Let me kill the document so people can actually. I don't think you want to see us. We're not getting comments for whatever reason. So if you've left comments, I'm sorry. But it feels like such a why are we arguing about this thing that affects 0.002% of the population? It is dehumanizing this population and making them a punching bag because they're the others. And so engaging, I have my thoughts, but we've never had that conversation here on the show because there's no point in participating in the dehumanization and participating in these conversations that are distractions from what matters, which is who holds power, who's wielding power, and what are they going to do with it.
Right.
And so that's how I view a lot of those kind of conversations.
Because a lot of the different laws that it does around like trans people, these have been concrete laws that have been going on for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
That's why why are they allowed to do this? Because we've said we did this. We already did this. We don't know why you're
the separation of sex and gender as being the same thing. We say, okay, now gender is more about
into the mic.
More about the societal belief of how certain people who are of a certain gender act, like you're a whether you're a tomboy or a masculine or a feminine or a femboy or all these different things where you have different different areas where people kind of are. Doesn't have to be tied to what gender they are. You can be.
Let's get back to fascism. All right.
So,
we're not going down that rabbit hole.
So with
fascism,
back to fascism, wussy boy.
Right wing violence has also been it also has to get capped, and it's also almost like they're, I think, keeping their powder dry at this stage of the game right now. They are just
guy is going to give up his $180,000 F-250 and his $1.2 million house to go shoot up a bunch of nonsense. If why would you go to jail?
Correct.
And I think that's a big reason why you saw so many of these January 6th guys go to jail, is to say to the middle class guy, this isn't worth it.
Correct.
There's still a centralized force that can mete out justice if you have evil intent, right?
Which is very important because of the right-wing, gun boner that they have, they have so many weapons, you have to make sure that stays in check.
All right.
The left-wing violence is also dangerous, too. Don't get me wrong. I think the left the complete disservice, Antifa doesn't exist. It's okay, then who the heck has been burning everything down?
Right.
Who are these people?
Tim Walz is responsible for a lot. there's no excuse for what happened in the riots in 2020, and the fact that they weren't policed, and it was in a lot of ways not dealt with quickly. Like here in Indianapolis, the mayor was just missing for the weekend.
Well, let's just go back to 2016 and the inauguration of Trump. They destroyed D.C.
Yeah,
not forget
and they
about
will
the
again.
left destroyed D.C.
Yeah,
but no, the right wing camps are they are. I don't want to say they're preparing for violence, but they have completely violent tendencies against anyone who doesn't look or act like them. They're there, they exist, and they've been ginned up with dog whistles from other podcasts that wear beanies that keep saying Civil War every 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I just watched a creation of a new militia in Tennessee where he's getting up and making these statements, and it's just like it's almost like creating a religion of fighting back against the people, and they see themselves as the new patriots. Right, and they want to get those people who were put in jail on January 6th. They want them out of jail. They want them freed because they were actually the patriots. Yep. It's just it's weird to watch how that went from that day where a lot of people were saying these guys should go to jail, this is wrong, to now embracing them and saying that they were the patriots and we should move and do more of this.
Yeah, so let's talk about the period between Election Day and is January 6th always the day of the vote totals and the counting?
I think it's different every year.
Is it different every year?
Yeah. Whatever day. It's like the first.
Whatever.
Yeah, I think it's first Tuesday.
All right.
Yeah, of the year. Or second Tuesday.
I just don't see how we get through the next 3 to 4 months without violence from either side. I mean, is that crazy? I mean, here's my thing. I know that a lot of this sounds far-fetched, but you folks listening, we pay attention to a lot of this stuff, and we're trying to think about it from a larger view and from a historical perspective, and I just don't see how we get through the next 3 months without violence. Hopefully there's no assassinations. Hopefully nobody dies. Hopefully nobody loses their business. We don't want there to be violence of any kind. I don't think that you can have the American government be overthrown through violence. I do think you could have a January 6th at a bunch of different state capitals, or maybe some violence against vote counters, or electors, or they're trying the stolen elector thing again. That didn't work last time, but this time they're going to try again. Even though he's not coming from a position of power, he's coming outside the office.
Remember, if Vance were vice president instead of.
Yeah, but I mean, we have to deal with it now, right?
Yeah,
like,
we're dealing with now.
If you're dealing with now, like,
that close.
what kind of violence could you see? The violence that you'd see is Trump wins, MLK assassination night riots across the country. In cities ranging from Indianapolis to New York to D.C., like the day that Breonna Taylor's verdict was read out and Louisville puts garbage trucks everywhere to kind of corral the violence and just say, sorry, you're going to lose your apartment building because of these lefties and Antifa. I think that's a certainty in my mind, especially if he wins. If Trump loses, I think you're going to see that play out kind of like 2020, where there's a slow burn of like, maybe there's still a chance, but we are going to see a proliferation dwarfing 2020 in terms of misinformation. Thanks to foreign actors and then just the systems that we have built of information that have been so deeply grooved in since COVID. That I think is a certainty from both sides. Both sides. If Trump wins, Democrats will think this was stolen. If Trump loses, Republicans will think this is stolen. And the president is going to go in with their legitimacy questions. The Supreme Court now, their legitimacy is questioned. Congress has never had legitimacy in the minds of the American people.
4% approval?
Yeah, so I think we are, especially with facing some of those bigger challenges that we talked about earlier, we could be in for a very rough period over the next few years.
So Kamala, since she's vice president, she would be supervising over the vote.
Correct.
And that's going to cause havoc.
And if this is tied and you get 269, 269, and it goes into the
moving to
House,
Germany.
Worst case scenario.
Or Trump could win the popular vote and lose the electoral college, and that would be crazy. Or no, there's some like Harry Enten of CNN said that's a possibility because of his. Trump is increasing with black men, Latinos. He's not getting as many white working class folks as he used to, but she is not driving out black men, some black women. She has a real problem with Gen Z, which is directly linked to Palestine. Yep. If you talk to people who are on progressive camps, especially different ethnicities or however you say it, like Palestine is like the thing, Harry, that seems to really make them go, nah, I'm going to sit this one out.
And a lot of that is the slopaganda from TikTok because they're turning the heat up on that. That is the, I think the best analogy I heard was from DevCon was the people walking around with the gigantic teddy bears and winning on TikTok, and that's what Palestine is, the teddy bear. Just walking that around.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
It's sad to see that because the thing is that if you do just a bit of research on that, on Palestine and everything else, these kids, I think when they get a little bit older, are going to look back and be horrified at it. Because, Gaza is not the kind of place where Hamas or Hezbollah was really accepting of anything that they would do in real life.
Correct.
So
it's I think it's the current thing.
Yeah.
And then if you could watch YouTube videos of people of Gaza Strip beforehand, just this is before October 7th, and just looking at that is the whole live, this is an open air prison, that's an open air prison when it starts almost, it looks like a mall that's going on there. Let's be truthful. I think with a lot of the violence thing, I think a civic thing, just reminding people is listen, it matters who does matter who's president, but there's a lot of different guardrails that we need to reinforce and think about that, and also down ballot as you go cast your ballot to understand about that, and also putting other guardrails in place and not allowing different things up, especially because I think Obama also helped erode that and other people allowing different awful executive orders going through. I think for some people, especially right-wing people, having cope going, see, if you vote for Trump, there's going to be less violence. No, I think a lot of the left-wing violence is because a lot of them didn't get smacked down like they did the right, because they don't really have the massive weapons like the New York City lawyers who were firebombing cops with Molotovs in their hand, got caught, and they basically got a slap on the wrist. I think that was egregious, that judge allowed that. Which does add a lot of different things to it,
victimization.
Yeah,
because they got a slap on the wrist, and the guy who took a tour of the Capitol on the 6th ended up with 5 years in jail.
Correct. Yeah, right. They moved a lectern 12 feet, and you sat there. Yeah.
He walked out with it, and then he did 5 years.
Set a lectern down. Yeah.
Anything on violence, Rhinehold? Thoughts?
I have no idea. I mean, I think a lot of it plays out with how the election turns out. If it's very, 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 very close, I think there's going to be a lot more problems. If it's a much more clear winner of some sort, and we've got 40% of the possibility is that it's going to be somebody sweeping the battleground states, one or the other. That's going to be the majority of the way.
So you follow this stuff, you understand how the polls work, and you follow this really closely. And I honestly haven't. I just see that it's 50-50. And I don't really trust the poll. The whole system was designed, and I forget what book I read this in, but that the American system was designed by James Madison to include a lot of elections at a lot of different levels, because the only accurate way to judge popular sovereignty and to judge the will of the people, to understand where they're at, is to poll them in elections to gauge where they're at. And so the only poll you can trust is election day, right? Now that we're not trusting that, not good. But the reality is that Nate Silver and Real Clear Politics and all these different polling services, I just, in the cell phone era, I don't know that I trust much of it. The polls always show that it's close, and then it never ends up close, except for I think 2016. And so I don't really know what to believe. Is it close, Rhinehold?
I think it's close, but there's a lot of things to be concerned about with the polling in the fact that it doesn't add up. A lot of it doesn't add up. And there's a lot of different reasons why. And I don't know how much we want to get into the different mechanisms that are causing.
Like, how does polling work? Is that what you...
Well, not necessarily polling work, but you got to go out and you got to find a sample group of people. Then you have to take that sample group and say, okay, is that sample group indicative of what we know is to be what the population generally is, so that we can extrapolate it out. And then we have to make adjustments based off that, based off what we think that the electorate's going to be. So you're almost guessing and conforming it into what you thought it was to begin with. So if you're using a 2020 bias, you're going to be off. If you're using a 2022 bias, you might be. It's how do you calculate that bias out, and what are you thinking about? Because a lot of the firms, I think they're using a 2020 because that was the last presidential election, but since then, we've had, the Dobbs case come through, and a lot of things happen that I think is going to throw that completely out of whack. So they could be miscounting or miscalculating what the numbers are really saying based off that. Now, you got
which is kind of why Dobbs really was overturned the 2022 elections, because people didn't realize how much that was going to be a big deal. Yep. And you look at the Georgia early returns, like of who has voted. You can't see how they voted, but you see who has voted. It's 60% of the people in Georgia are Democrats that have voted. And I think it's like 30% of all the votes that are cast have been cast in Georgia, right?
Possible votes that could be cast have been cast.
Yeah, so you could, and if women are turning out in mass, that could lead to a Kamala
you
presidency.
You can look at some people who do like raw polling and see what their numbers are without any extrapolation or trying to calculate this stuff and see what they say. But that's not really good, because who's answering the phone, who's answering the polls.
Right.
Some of these polls are online polls, which are just horrible.
Right.
And then you go to someplace like Ameris, where they're trying to do their own calculations based off stuff, and they're showing Harris +5 across the board. Mm-hmm. Are they completely wrong? Who knows? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the right ones and the other ones are the wrong ones. It's going to be crazy on the aftermath to figure out what happened to the polling and why, because we really are losing the ability. We used to be able to go door knocking and phone calling to landlines, and we would get a good sample size, but that has been hard to pin down since then.
Yeah.
And really developing an idea of what the voters are really after when you have so much change in both of the parties kind of thinking. Like we have a lot of political change going on, especially if going from conservative to a much more populist front on the MAGA side. And on the left are trying to steer clear of what they were doing and do this now. And they're trying to present themselves as libertarian in some way. And so there's a lot of change going on, and it's hard to pin those into boxes that polling requires in order to get good, accurate numbers.
Yeah. Brian?
My totally accurate and 100% effective polling is that I'm seeing more Harris wall signs than I did Hillary or Biden signs all throughout Huntington County where I live. It is Harris a very deep red county, and I won't say I'm stunned, but I will say that I am seeing a lot more of those signs throughout houses having them, not just on a street corner or something like that, but actual houses having him out there. And that's been endemic, I think, in a lot of other places. We've talked to other people that have had the same thing. So I think that it's going to be tougher in Indiana. Obviously, Indiana tends to lean towards, except for Obama 2008, tends to lead towards the Republicans. But, the thing is, I think there's an undercurrent out there. And every time I look at this and I go back to it, I just think there's a lot. We had a big undervote with Trump in 2020 when it comes to the election overall. Now we're in 2024. I don't think that undervote suddenly got smaller for him. I think it's going to be a lot larger because of the felony convictions, all the other garbage that's going on. There's going to be a lot of people who might go, I'm a Republican, but you know what? I'm plugging my nose and voting for Kamala, or what are these weird names underneath? I don't know. Chase?
Well, that's one thing I'm seeing in, like, let's say you look at the Wisconsin race, and you go down ballot and you look at the Senate race that's there, and the Democrats up by 4.
Yeah.
But they're saying that it's tied at the president level. So they're saying that these people are going to go in and vote for the Democrat senator, but they're going to vote for Trump. I don't see that. It doesn't make sense to me.
And I don't see that in Wisconsin either.
The polling is.
I don't know how you are a base Democrat voter and then scratch for Trump.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
I.
Wisconsin's a little got an independence streak, almost
Michigan,
like
I would see
Indiana.
more because
Yeah.
Michigan's got a much larger Palestinian.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
do they think that they can go in there and say, I do not like what they've said. I don't like what Biden's done. I don't like Kamala.
No, Jill Stein is
But-
carrying a lot of
Yeah,
that vote.
but they're not going to go Trump. Trump's going to be way worse on him than that. So
Michigan, I think, is going to have a healthy amount of Jill Stein votes
Yep.
because Muslim polling for Jill Stein's, I've seen her campaign put some stuff out that's like,
and where
Wow.
and where do
Okay.
some of the RFK voters really fall? Because a lot of the RFK voters were RFK voters because they didn't want to support Trump. Right. Now they feel like they're kind of stuck in there. Do they go? And there's like 10% of the there was 20% support for Haley, right? When she dropped out, whatever. So when she ran through the primaries, half of those people are actively talking about voting for Kamala.
yeah, I mean, in my circles, the RFK people all have landed at Trump. The Haley people all have split. Like I'd say 50 Kamala, 50 I'm just not voting, or like there's and some went to Trump. They just look, I can't
hold their
afford
nose.
4 more years of Biden, so I'm not voting for Kamala.
Yeah, no. A lot of us who have been through the 70s are like, it's not really that bad. You think this is bad, guys?
But the thing is, we never had really the cult of personalities that we have right now, and all of the garbage wrapped up in. I mean, Carter, Mondale, Bush.
Well, I remember when because I was in 6th grade when the first Reagan election was going, and Reagan was going to start World War III.
Oh yeah, no,
Reagan
that was
it was
guaranteed.
going to be the end of the world. He's going to start World
Yeah.
War III. I heard this when I was in 6th grade.
I heard everybody was going to get drafted. That was.
There's part of
all
me that
over
feels that way about Trump. It's like 2016, like 17 through 2020. Like I didn't do too bad. It wasn't that bad. It was
defending
annoying.
Trump. I was defending Trump. Remember low key wall, all that stuff. I was defending him right up until the time I read the Mueller report.
Right.
And that I was like, and people are like, well, that exonerated him. I'm like, no, it didn't. You were told that by Barr, who decided to just ignore everything that was in there and say what he wanted to say. That turned my eye on what was going on because I saw how much he was willing to break the rule of law, and he did not care.
Yeah.
Coupled with the fact that I watched The Apprentice, I saw how he makes his decisions.
More than anybody,
did
like
that?
more than
Why?
anything, I think Jan 6 is the thing that's if he loses, it's because of January 6th. Yeah, because enough people, and I know several people that I was shocked that they're going to vote for Harris, and it's because of January 6th.
Yeah.
I think that's you mentioned that you're like, well, I forget what you said before we started recording, but it was something along the lines. Well, at least he's not going to overturn the election. Or
Well,
she
yeah,
is.
Kamala will at least leave when voted out. She will leave. She will at least leave.
I mean,
Right. And I think that's like people are going when her time is up, she's gonna leave.
well, Trump was saying
That's
on
the
Rogan the
difference.
other day how I only lost by a few thousand votes in some key
22,000.
areas. And it's like, yeah, so did Hillary. Only
Right.
by a few thousand votes in a couple key areas. And they were concerned, but they didn't go down that path.
Right.
Yeah, he
they were
admits-
mad at first. They're saying he's not our president, blah, blah, blah. But within a week or two, that all just faded away. And they were like, okay, this is it. We accept the reality. We move on.
Correct.
Well, how many times do we have? He's not my president with Bush. I mean, that's the thing.
Well,
This
we've
just
had that
echoes
for
and
years.
echoes
I mean,
throughout
we had that.
Okay,
I
so-
heard that with Biden the day after. I mean, I'm sitting in a tire shop and the guy's like, "He's not my president." And
So why can't Kamala close the deal? Like the first hour of this podcast, you listen to that and you go, "Wow, I don't want this guy to be president." How is she not up 10 points with someone this deeply maniacal?
a couple of reasons. One is she's trying too hard to win everybody and not just go out and just say, "These are my positions, what we're going to do." She's trying to mealy mouth and politician her way into winning everybody. It's like, that's not how you win this election.
She's using traditional campaign techniques that has never worked against Trump. She's, I'm a middle class, blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody gives a crap about how are you going to make me stay middle class? I'm barely middle class now. How are you
What are
going
you gonna do?
Right. Like, it doesn't feel like she has any plans.
And here's part of the problem, too, is that we pick presidents based off popularity, and I hate it. I hate the fact that we pick presidents on who can get up there and give a rousing speech and get people motivated and do this. And it's like, no, I want someone who's a good executive who's going to function in a certain way. I don't care how smart.
I don't think she meets either of those requirements.
Eisenhower wasn't out there going,
right.
But then
Just
you
one
see
nerd.
Obama get up there and give a speech, and you're like, okay, I remember what this used to look like.
Right.
But the thing is that this entire process is now geared towards, as you said, populists and things like that, people that check boxes, unfortunately. And this is the problem. I mean, that's why I made the comment about, we can imagine a Romney-Newsom election. We'd be all bored of our skulls because they're qualified. They're our executives. Maybe they don't do everything we like.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's boring, and that doesn't get people out to hate vote because I don't want her to win. I'm voting for Trump. I don't want Trump to win. I'm voting for her. But we've seen this with Hillary. We've seen this going back with Biden, even things like that. But it's just gotten worse, and we have to get out of this cycle of inept politicians.
I mentioned that with the MC. When the MC first started, I said the reason that they're getting so popular so quick is that they are making people the victims, or getting people to vote out of anger. They're doing an emotional thing where they're getting people to carry on. But the problem with that is you cannot continue that forever.
No.
Eventually people tire out and get exhausted. And that's what happened with Trump at the end of his first term, and why he didn't win a second term is because people were exhausted of it. Now people had time to go sit back and think about it for a little while. And maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe
Right.
things,
And
they're
you
starting
also
to
have
kind of come back in.
his misinformation channels.
Well,
and
yeah, right. No lies and
it's
stuff.
the greatest heist ever. He caused the inflation by shutting down the economy, putting Fauci in charge, depressing supply, and then increasing demand of stimulus. And then somehow we blame Joe Biden. I don't get how that worked. But I think it's interesting that we are constantly told about the predatory leftist elites and how they have a near total domination of American life. And then Beyonce gets up at a Kamala rally and literally nobody cares. There's just, it just falls flat. You have
Taylor Swift.
It's 50. It's entertainment. The media is trying hard. There just seems to be this feeling of certainty that he's going to win. That it feels like there is the counterculture against that. The cathedral. You remember when they all parroted that bit, right? Like of the elite institutions in Hollywood, higher education, media. These really feel like they have no power whatsoever, even though we're constantly told that they're dominating. And if Trump wins, Harry, it feels like that whole argument is BS, because if they're really so dominant, then how did the guy that they dread, that they shake in terror over, actually beat them? Is cancel culture dead, Harry?
Cancel culture, I don't know. Like, it kind of existed, but didn't exist. It was just kind of like BS crap that just happened on Twitter,
Right.
Or X.
Well,
But
it's really, cancel culture is really a libertarian viewpoint, but
yeah,
If you say the N-word, you will get fired. That's just how it works. Sorry. You're not being canceled.
unless you have the New Ham LPNH.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't.
unless your name is Coffee.
Sorry.
I guess you
Allegedly.
you can get a big audience if you say it too. I don't know.
No, that's the other thing is like that always like bothered me too. Is like the cathedral is supposed to be all powerful, all do this, or like even like the teacher thing. I was like, listen, yeah, if they can do all this, then why aren't the teachers making the kids read and do their homework? I don't understand.
If I can brainwash my kids, is what teachers will say. If I can brainwash the kids, I get them to sit down and learn their alphabet and do the math. I can't even get them to do that stuff, and you think I'm telling them how to think about politics in the world,
right? And vote and love and do all this other stuff. Oh yeah, super old.
I think a lot of people don't remember when they were in school how much they just did not care what their teacher said.
Yeah.
Leftist domination, Brian.
The only thing I'll say about that is that the problem is that there are cases out there where people are going out and like the kindergarten, the mom that was trying to get the curriculum for kindergarten and the school was refusing to release it. Mm-hmm. And then they threw a lawsuit on her and tried to ban her from like going to school board meetings and stuff because she was going and asking for stuff. Yeah. That's the problem, is that these things unfortunately do exist.
Yeah.
People blow it out of proportion. Don't get me wrong. The vast majority of teachers, and the teachers that I talk to, aren't sitting there going, I don't want to have to sit there and figure out which pronouns to do. They go, I've got 17 IEPs. I've got to teach 17 different ways in each class. And if I screw one up, I get fired and I lose everything.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And that's the problem with the ineptness and things like that, because now we've asked them to try to do everything. The schools, like you said earlier, were like a welfare, for the communities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But now it's extending so far. It's just, when you sit there and look at that, all of this ineptness in there, and nobody's going to say we're going to make this better.
Right.
Nobody at all.
Everything's bad when you institute politics into it. That's why I think the departments, all the stuff that's an executive run, should be run by NGOs and maybe have a little small government oversight. But the problem is that when you get government involved into those things, you're introducing politics into them. And I don't want politics involved in how our natural resources are being managed, or the transportation is happening, or the education's happening. Just keep the politics out of it. And the only way you're going to do that is to keep the government out of it. And that's where we should be looking to solve. But we're not there. And since we're not there, how do we deal with it? And that's the problem.
Well, I don't want any of your libertarian solutions.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Reform Rhino Libtard. I know literally somebody said to me, like, what was it? It was... I said, well, Dennis was telling me, and they yelled, well, Dennis is a liberal. And I said, but Dennis is right about this. And I have this weird thing where I have families and friend circles. Like when I go on the pat down and I'm in Atlanta, the pressure and the feeling of disloyalty because I'm not voting for Kamala, or in family circles, friend circles here, the disloyalty that I'm not voting for Trump, that I'm a secret. I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law thinks I'm voting for Kamala because I make memes about how awful Trump is, and I talk about that. And I don't care if I vote for Kamala, if I vote for Donald Trump, if I vote for Chase Oliver, if I don't vote, that's not changing my worth as a person. That's not changing my standing in their life. And if it does, that's on them. Like this weird notion that somehow if you vote differently than me, you are a less than, like, it's an otherization. It's just a fact of polarization, tribal thinking. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not voting the way you want, but you can't sit here and tell me that I don't love you because I don't agree with who should be president. Yeah. But they have been so, like, you don't care about people. Well, yeah, I care a lot about people. It's just that I don't see government solutions as the way to do that because I care about people. Yeah. It's ineffective. So I don't know. Have you guys faced any of that where family and friends, like, because you're not doing what I want you to do, you're not...
Gee,
I think
you don't love me.
What that's like.
I think one thing that
we love you and we tease you.
No, but the thing is
that Rhinehold hits on a lot of time is critical thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of these people don't do critical thinking. They also, I'm noticing that some of these people do not have free will. They have none. They are robots. I don't know how they're living. There is no inner conductor. They're thinking on themselves.
Yeah.
They're just parroting things off of boxes, and it's just it's goofy. It's weird when you realize these people exist out there.
We just give you crap, Rhinehold, because I like to poke you because you give good arguments.
But what's funny is that when Obama was in, I wasn't on this group and doing the podcast, but I was writing articles. I've been writing articles about politics since the late '80s. And you go back and look at my blog of what I was given to Obama and telling him how this is. I called him a war.
Yeah, but that was then. This is now. Now you love Kamala.
I called him a war criminal president. And
who are you voting? Who are you voting for?
I am not voting for Kamala. I am not voting for Trump. I will probably vote for Chase.
Okay,
that's fine.
Good libertarian.
Are you even voting, Harry?
Are you still voting?
I disagree with him on a few things.
Didn't like Obama also have it because Obama had. I think a lot of people need a good retrofit. Like that's a good free. The two good ways to check, like especially someone on the left for free will, is talk about the Rittenhouse case and Obama. It is a good way to find out, like, okay, you've actually critical thought about what's going on. Am I voting? I'm probably going to. I need to vote because there's a lot of different local stuff that's going on. I need to do for that. So definitely going doing that because there's a lot of people in our local community that I enjoy and I need them to stay on the board because if they don't, then I need to step up and I don't want to.
Yeah. I think there's something like it's always the top of the ticket, and then the votes diminish as it goes down. So
we
like
have a very important government race or governor race this year. So.
yeah,
that's
so like
very
60% of
important,
people will vote for president, and then by the time you get to town council, it'll be like 22%. Right? So people just go, all right, I'm done. I don't know any of these people. I'm just moving on. I want to be one of those people that's like it's the opposite. I want there to be a bunch of people voting for local stuff and state stuff, and then not as many people voting for the federal people, because like here in Indiana, we don't really have any choices. I could vote for Kamala, Trump, Chase, right in my dog's name. Like it doesn't really matter because this state's going red. Yeah. Now in the state race, like there's one race where I really don't like the Republican. I think they're like he's going to get removed. So I don't know if I'm going to vote for the Democrat in that race or not. I think I might just because it sounds close, even though every fiber of her being, I just disagree with. She's so pro-choice, it makes me want to vomit. So I don't know if I can. I just don't know, but I want a Republican to lose. I want in a super majority state here in Indiana, I want a Republican to lose.
Yes.
And we got to do something about straight ticket voting because it is just the worst.
God, it's the worst.
Yeah, straight ticket voting means here in Indiana, a Democrat and a Libertarian don't have a chance. Brian, what were you going to say?
Can I say one thing before we go to Brian? And the other thing is like about the keeping politics out of the election board is like there's been that huge ho hum of trying to bring political affiliation into the education. Like, oh, we want to know these political affiliations. Like, no, we do not. We do not want this. But yeah, sorry.
No, and I agree with that. I want that staying as far away as possible from all of those education boards and probably even local politics because some of them are just ridiculous. I'm getting a lot of pressure on my family because I mispronounced Kamala's name once.
Well, that's because you're racist.
Well, yeah, I'm racist, and also people are like, "Well, why would you feel if your name was mispronounced?" And I said, "Have you ever seen my last name? You guys can even pronounce it." So
I don't even know what it is. It's just there's some names you look at and you go, "I'm not even learning it."
Yeah,
I'm not learning that.
No,
but the question is, of course, the same thing. Oh, you must be a closet Trump supporter. No, I've never voted for Trump. I voted for Gary Johnson, 2022, 2016. I voted for Joe, and now I'm voting for Chase on that. I really do not like Mike Braun for here in Indiana.
Yeah.
And he really ticked me off on that mailer. But I think down the board, I'm mixed bag going through there because just like this, I want to see us have a little bit of chaos in politics where people go, oh, wait, I need to behave and maybe have a cohesive thought as opposed to, orange man bad, orange man good.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, who do you think's going to win, Ryan?
Kamala.
Why?
Why? I think there's more underlying support for her. I think people remember Trump, and I think they understand the chaos that's coming. I think Kamala probably wins low 300s in the Electoral College. She probably sweeps the battleground states, or at least gets darn close. Popular vote's going to be closer, but I still think she probably ends up winning.
Harry?
Honestly, government will always win.
Unfortunately. Finally, some libertarianism on this show.
But no, I'm gonna have to. I want to give it. I'm also giving with. What is it? Kamala. Whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Maya Rudolph is who I'm choosing.
I think that's who's going to win. It's going to be by a very thin margin, which is going to tick off a lot of different people, and it's going to be awful, up until. But that's my opinion. Because just like Brian was talking about, like seeing more like Harris signs, I have seen a lot less Trump signs in my neighborhood. That is also, I've noticed too, is the lack of Trump signs. Not even like bringing up the old Trump signs. They're just, I've seen like there's some too hardcore people on my street, but before it was up and down. All kinds of stuff. I'm not seeing that this time.
I could say there's probably at least a dozen in 2016, probably more than a dozen in 2020, and there's one in my neighborhood this year. One.
Interesting. Well, there's none on my street. I live in the bluest district in the entire state. So,
well, let's put this
like the township that I live in is the most Democrat in the whole state of Indiana.
The city I live in,
my counselor is a socialist. He's Jesse Brown, literally whatever Ryan Lindsay was, a DSA.
Honestly, like local politics, socialists and libertarians are great bedfellows together. They should work.
You know what
is?
It's funny. Rob Kendall from WIBC said, "Isn't it weird that guy sometimes like gets it right?" I was like, "No, because horseshoe theory, man. The libertarians and the democratic socialists, like, we come together on some issues like foreign policy and other things, but
Yep.
and just like corruption and what is right and wrong, like
Correct,
those
yeah.
are that's where we can be allies. Now, you know, his takes on capitalism are just ridiculous. But,
Correct. Yeah.
and bicycles.
Bicycles are great and amazing. You want the freedom to travel around without having a government.
It's not
stick.
cars' fault that I almost hit somebody every single day.
It is cars' fault the way your car is designed, the way the road is
No,
designed. The road
it is
by
the drunk
people-
guy that crawls out into the middle of the street when the light is green that he gets hit.
But if the road was designed correctly, he could have crawled out there and it would have been fine.
Are there not houses for the poor? All right, Rhinehold, who's
I'll
just
say
gonna
the
win?
city I live near, because I don't live in a city. I live very rural. I went to get something from the supermarket and it's we're talking like 1,000 people, 1,200 people maybe. I go to the supermarket there and I got stopped because there was a Trump train going through. They had like trucks with the flags and everything else.
Did you immediately start
And-
weeping?
And they were just going around the city. They were just kind of taking the loop around the city, honking their horns and people waving at them, telling them, yeah, good job, and that sort of thing. But it was like 12. 2 years ago, that number was bigger.
Yep.
There's a couple places around me that are Trump sign people, but those numbers are smaller. I'm disappointed that one of them also has a
Jason?
no governor
Rainwater?
sign.
Oh, yeah.
How
their
dare
yard.
he?
We gotta
Trump,
Take care of what you can.
rainwater. I'm like,
This is the libertarian candidate for governor here in Indiana.
and I have like 5 rainwater signs in my porch. If anybody wants any, I've got some.
I've got one in mind.
So I see things when I'm looking at the numbers, when I'm looking at the polling, something smells off to me, very much so. I still think we're seeing a similar effect that's going to be like 2020, where everybody thought that the Republicans are going to do much better than they did. I think we're going to see a similar thing here. I don't think it's going to translate into the Senate as much. I think the Senate is going to go red. I think the House is up in air. I don't know.
The
House may be, because if you look at the generic things, when you see the like Kamala's favorability numbers are higher than Trump's.
Yeah, but yeah, by
When
a
you
lot.
see who do you want to be generically, who do you want to run the Congress? Democrats over Republicans. And you see those numbers and then you see things different in the polling. I think that is telling me the polling is off. I think Kamala wins. I remember we did 4 years ago, we did the Biden where I predicted over 300 and I was basically mocked that was never going to happen. Trump was going to win, blah, blah, blah. But we were talking to some Lions of Liberty people who, anyway,
we were right and they weren't,
yeah.
because they were predicting with their hearts and not
what
their,
they thought was going to happen. But just based off that, I think Kamala, but it could completely go the other way because, like I said, the polling is telling us weird stuff, and I don't know. But seeing the numbers coming out and the early voting, I really think that it's going to be a Kamala win.
I think a lot of that, but I think Trump's going to win because
100% okay with that because
I think she's not motivating the people she needs to motivate, which is how Hillary lost and Trump won those votes in those battleground states that are the same battleground states that he needs, that she needs. And, you know, we're here in the Midwest, and I think it's that societal pressure to conform around the people that like, you know, that you live with. I think that has an effect on people. I think people's economic situation, it's the economy, stupid. Yesterday was Carvel's 80th birthday. Like, there's this very real sense of like, I can't vote for Kamala because economically I cannot afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. And, you know, she's also very anti-coal and pro-green energy, and that's going to play in Pennsylvania and, you know, Wisconsin, Michigan, and some of these blue-collar areas. He's also picking up. So, the reason Hillary lost is that black voters didn't turn out as much. Biden won because black voters did turn out, but he also took enough white working class folks that it put him over the top over Trump. I mean, the thing in 2020 is we didn't have January 6th at that point, right? We didn't have Dobbs at that point. And so I could be totally wrong that it's going to be Kamala because so many women are going to turn out and vote against Trump, or so many Republicans are going to just sit this one out or make a protest vote and say, you can't be in power again. You have disqualified yourself with the one unpardonable sin, which is you leave when you lose. And if you don't, you're out. So I think it's totally possible to go either way at this point. But I just think she has been so unimpressive and so unpersuasive that when you look at Trump, you know what Trump is. And most people like some things about Trump, and there's some things they don't like, but they're really just going with their wallet, and they're going with their gut. And if they look at the Democrat, he's half dead, I can't vote for that guy, or she's kind of silly, and I'm not sure that she really has a command of the job. I think part of it is she over-prepares and she tries to think about what she's been told to say or what she wants to say, and she trips over her words. I've worked with candidates like that where you over-prepare them and then they get out there and they're not thinking about and being organic and vulnerable and open and spontaneous. They're thinking about all the crap you put in their head because you over-prep them. That happened in gubernatorial races. And so I think that could be something, but I just think she's not inspiring enough to gain the independence that she needs, and it's going to be another Hillary situation where he comes in and he's working his butt off. I mean, just like 2016, he had a really bad August, then it swung back in October. 2 days ago, he was up at 7:30 doing interview. Then he had a rally, then an interview. Then he gets back home at 1:30 p.m. That's what he was doing, in 2016. And in 2020, he couldn't do that, so he lost. And
what's
so
funny is
there's just an energy there, and I think that momentum may help him.
What's funny is a couple things there. One is that you talk about the Hillary thing, but you also remember that people were giving Trump the leg up because they knew what Hillary was.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what Trump was. So they went the other way. They went
so
to
it could be, hey, we're going to take we know this, so we're going to take the unknown.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that you talk about the energy and everything, but we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing less signs, we're seeing less things like that. And if you watch some of those rallies, you watch about an hour into them, people are leaving.
Yeah.
And when you see him coming out and waving to people when he leaves a building, and then you see the other side of the camera and there's nobody there.
Yeah, the funny thing is Chris Galt, one of the original hosts of this show, is at a Trump rally right now in the very front row. Can you believe it? All right, we got to wrap because I have a podcast meeting that started 1 minute ago that surely we will not go till 4 o'clock. But we've done almost 2.5 hours. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you, fellows, for being here. Other people that are down there. Okay, good. My unlocking intermittently the front door worked. So thanks so much for listening. We hope that you stay safe. We will try to get another show in before, but we'll definitely do a show after the election and kind of do a recap. Hopefully we'll all be in person. We'll talk about that afterwards. But thanks, everybody, for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. We are libertarians.
Because we also got to do the